We closed that for personnel matters. In this case, City Administrator Chris Kukulski's evaluation. So our apologies for making you sit there for a couple minutes, but we are here and ready to go. So if you would, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our invocation by Councilmember Boyette. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, please guide us to create and implement policies that are fair, reasonable, and effective. Policies to keep our citizens safe in their homes and on our streets. Policies to protect the vulnerable. Policies to foster welcoming and friendly neighborhoods which benefit the residents and developers. Policies to provide reliable streets, water, sewer, trash services. Policies to promote recreation and wellness through our parks and trails. Policies to encourage business development and job creation. And most of all, Lord, give us policies to encourage cooperation among all of us. Amen.
Denise, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Shaw. Here. Gulick. Here. Neese.
Here.
Owen.
Here.
Joy.
Present.
Chiriki.
I'm here.
Tidswell.
Yo.
Purington. Here. Boyette.
Here.
Repsis.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. We have two sets of minutes for our review and approval tonight. First is up September 26, 2022. Are there comments or motion? September 26, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I move we approve minutes September 26, 2022.
Second by Councilmember Boyette. Any discussion or changes to the motion? Okay, we'll move to vote. If in favor of approval of the September 26 minutes as drafted, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes. We'll move to October 10th. Councilmember Chiriki.
I move to accept the minutes of the October 10th meeting with the following amendment. In my remarks at the beginning of the meeting, I was talking about the Downtown Housing Group and not the Downtown Billings Association. So that sentence would say that I spoke of the Downtown Housing Group and the results of the Downtown Housing Study.
Do you know what page that appears on?
It's on the first page. It's in the council reports. It would be in council reports.
Okay, thank you. Page 2 on my copy. So with that as a proposed change, Councilmember Gulick.
Second.
Oh, okay. Then we have a motion. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, if in favor of the motion for approval with that one change, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes. Brings us to council courtesies. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. On your table, you'll find a little handout that we're using for the Our Town grant that was awarded to the City of Billings from the National Endowment for the Arts. And the RFP has gone out. We're calling on artists to come forward and apply to be an artist in residence and do a second part of a project that is to help to establish some of the research and to establish what would become at some point a public arts council. So as you can see from the brochure, the deadline for those to apply is November the 28th at 5 o'clock. And this gives just a quick overview of the things that the grant will be funding, which is placemaking hubs, a playbook, and then a public arts committee, or however that might work out. But that work needs to be done. I would also like to acknowledge that we have with us Elise Monette from the Planning and Transportation Department. Planning Department. She works in active transportation. And Melissa Henderson from Riverstone Health, who are also part of the leadership team working on this grant. And also Carolyn Martin Kennedy, who has just a few remarks that she would like to make. Thank you.
Ms. Kennedy, it's all yours.
From the Billings Arts Association.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here this afternoon. My name is, I was introduced as Carolyn Martin Kennedy, and I'm here representing the Billings Art Association. Billings Art Association is proud to be a part of the Mobilize the Magic City project to enhance community art here in Billings. We're one of 4 partnerships on this project, the others being the National Endowment for the Arts, the City of Billings, and Healthy by Design. Billings Art Association was founded in 1954. We're a nonprofit organization of visual artists and art enthusiasts, and we meet once a month to share our art, teach each other, and several times a year we have events in which we offer our art for sale. Billings Art Association is excited to be a member of the project team leading this Magic City, Mobilize the Magic City project. As residents of the city of Billings, as well as artists, we believe that community art is important. We believe that it brings people together in the neighborhoods, both in the planning and in the enjoyment of the art project. We believe it reflects better on the city in which the art is there. We've all gone to cities where they've got lovely art, and we know how much it enhances the impression of a city. And I'm excited for the city of Billings, and I'm excited for Billings Art Association, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the Arts Association, all your other partners, and much appreciated. Take a look. They're looking to raise $20,000. Okay, other council courtesies. Councilmember Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to take a moment tonight and just say a few brief remarks about the murder-suicide that happened in our community last week. Melissa Darling and her son, Junior, were killed in their own home, and it's an unspeakable tragedy. It's a tragedy that should have never happened in any community, not in our community. Melissa and I worked together at Head Start. She had such a great heart, and she was such a firecracker. She took it upon herself to be the one who would come in. Her classroom was right next to my office, and she would come in and tell me when I was doing things that were aggravating the staff, which was often. And she was always the one who would march right in there and said she didn't ever want to complain without trying to fix things, because she was always trying to fix things. She was always trying to make things better and brighter, always trying to be creative and curious, and she's gone, and that shouldn't be. Her son should not be grieving his mother and brother right now. These things should not be happening in this community. We have a problem with domestic violence in Billings, and we have a problem with untreated mental health in Billings. And I want this to be a wake-up call for all of us on council, for all of us in the community. You know, this council has worked hard to drive more resources into domestic violence, but it needs to be the start, not the end of our conversation on this. There were 2 precious lives lost last week that are symbolic of many, many more. And I'm sad and I'm sick, and I pray for this family, but I pray that our community takes this moment to say we can do better. No one should be unsafe in their own home. No one. No one should fear what goes on inside their walls, and we have a chance to not just be sad about this, but to be active about it and to do better for the residents of our community and not let this tragedy be repeated. So I appreciate the conversations that I've had with our city administrator to work on a domestic violence initiative, which I look forward to bringing to this council soon. I would hope other council members would join in that conversation. There are well over 1,000 arrests in this community every year due to domestic violence, and we know that represents a very small fraction of the horror that children are seeing, that adults are seeing. And I hope that we take this time in her memory, in her son's memory, in the memory of a family that is grieving so much right now. And we do better, and we do more, and we don't let this moment pass. So I want to take a moment and say her name out loud and remind us all to keep Melissa and Junior in our thoughts and prayers in the coming weeks.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. Any other council courtesies before we move to proclamations? Seeing no other council courtesies, we do have three proclamations on our agenda tonight. First one is for Extra Mile Day, and it reads as follows. Whereas Billings, Montana is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individual citizens go collectively the extra mile in personal effort, volunteerism, and service. And whereas Billings, Montana is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort. Whereas Billings, Montana is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference. And whereas Billings, Montana acknowledges the mission of Extra Mile America to create 550 extra mile cities in America and is proud to support Extra Mile Day on November 1st, 2022. Now, therefore, I, Mayor of Billings, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2022 to be Extra Mile Day and urge each individual in the community to take time on this day to not only go the extra mile in his or her own life, but to also acknowledge all those who, by their inspiration to others and their efforts and commitment, make their organizations, families, community, country, and world a better place. Our next proclamation is for Lung Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death among men and women in the United States and Montana, accounting for more deaths than colon cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer combined. And whereas according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there were 3,646 new lung cancer cases, and 2,360 deaths because of lung cancer between 2015 and 2019 in Montana. And whereas the 5-year survival rate for localized lung cancer is about 60%, yet only about 24% of lung cancers are diagnosed at that early stage. Whereas funding for lung cancer research trials is far behind funding for research of many other cancers. And whereas African Americans have the highest lung cancer incidence and mortality of all races, and significant disparities in lung cancer screening, diagnosis, treatment, and mortality exist among African Americans and other racial minorities. And whereas lung cancer in people who've never smoked, a significant majority of whom are women, is proportionately increasing in the United States and is the 7th leading cause of cancer-related deaths, claiming 17,000 to 26,000 lives every year. And whereas organizations working in Montana, such as the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative and the Women's Lung Cancer Forum, are committed to lung cancer education and increasing screening rates in Montana. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, do hereby proclaim November 2022 as Lung Cancer Awareness Month in Montana, or in Billings, and recognize the need for more research in the area of lung cancer and lung cancer health disparities, and encourage all citizens to learn more about early detection through lung cancer screening. Finally, our next proclamation, we have some visitors with us who will give them an opportunity to comment here in just a second, is in favor of Red Ribbon Week. And proclamation goes as follows. Whereas alcohol and other drug abuse in the United States has reached epidemic levels, and whereas it's imperative that visible and unified prevention education efforts by community members be launched to reduce the demand for drugs, and whereas the National Family Partnership is sponsoring the National Red Ribbon Campaign, offering citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles and avoid the use of illegal drugs and the illegal use of legal drugs. And whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign will be celebrated in every community in America during Red Ribbon Week from October 23rd to October 31st, 2022. And whereas businesses, government, parents, law enforcement, agencies, media, religious institutions, schools, senior citizen and service organizations, and youth will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during this week-long campaign. And whereas the City of Billings supports the goals of Red Ribbon Campaign, and therefore be it resolved that I, as mayor of Billings, do hereby proclaim October 23 to 31st as Red Ribbon Week in Billings and encourage our citizens to participate in drug prevention education activities, making a visible statement that we strongly are committed to a drug-free community. And the proponents of the proclamation have been our young Marines. And I think we have some young Marine leaders and Marines. And if you'd like to introduce who you brought with us or brought with you today, please feel free, and feel free to comment further on the proclamation if you'd like to. Who do we have? Please come right to the microphone there. And whoever wants to introduce themselves, we'll ask the leaders to orchestrate.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. My name is Glenn Hand. I'm an adult volunteer with the Billings Young Marines. Chantel Rochine, she's also an adult volunteer. We have with us today Private Nelson, Young Marine Private Nelson, Young Marine PFC Rochine, Young Marine Lance Corporal Neese, and Young Marine Corporal Hand. These young men and women are representative of the Red Ribbon Week and our efforts to reduce the demand, again, as he said, for illegal drug use and the illegal use of legal drugs. They represent every day on a daily basis to their peers and to the community what it means to live a healthy, drug-free lifestyle. Any of you have anything to say? Corporal Hand?
This program is an essential part of this community. Same thing for drug demand reduction, Red Ribbon Week. If we don't open the eyes of the community to what is causing several mental health issues and suicides, then how's the problem going to get solved? If you don't know what's causing the problem, how do you know how you're going to stop it? Showing Red Ribbon Week is a great way to prove what's really happening.
Very good. Thank you very much. And our leaders, you wanted a photo with the council? If so, you can have the young Marines come forward. They can just stand in front of us here, and we'll stand tall. And you got a professional photographer you brought with you. All right. And better get in there. Okay. And the photographers, if we need to move or do something different, just let us know. All right. Well, thank you.
Good job.
And I should have asked if there was anybody who had come to comment on the Lung Cancer Awareness Month or Extra Mile Day proclamations. If so, raise your hand. I didn't think we had anybody. So, okay, well, that concludes our proclamations. We'll move to council reports. Council, do we have any reports from organizations that council members serve on our behalf that you would like to report on? Don't think we have any council reports then. So, city administrator report, Chris.
Mayor and Council, so I have 4 items. We'll take the easiest ones first. So there was one ex parte communication, so that's an email that came after 3 o'clock this afternoon pertaining to an item on the agenda for this evening. Second, regular agenda item number 4, we'll need a motion to remove it from the agenda per the request of South Billings Urban Renewal Group. So we just ask, not non-date certain, but after we're all done here, in order to remove that from the agenda, they'll need a majority vote to do that. And just in case, I assured them that even if you voted this down, you'd allow us to reschedule it. Jim Tevlin is here, but the group was very much hopeful that they wouldn't be giving a presentation, as it's been communicated that this would be removed from the agenda. Third up is a change to the agenda. So in the salmon-colored piece of paper in front of you, this is consent agenda item 1B. And the confusion here is a referenced on both the agenda and in the recommendation that you were approving an agreement, and you're not approving an agreement. What you're approving is which entity of the three bidders we will negotiate an agreement with. So what you have in front of you changes that. Staff recommended change to the consent agenda: professional services bid selection of Rimrock Foundation and Substance Abuse Connect for mobile crisis response services. The recommendation is staff recommends bid award to Rimrock Foundation and Substance Abuse Connect to provide a mobile crisis response services as set forth in the city's request for proposals for individuals experiencing acute mental health crises. Timely, the comments earlier tonight. This shall be, we anticipate this will be a 2-year agreement with renewals for up to 8 additional years by mutual agreement in writing and contingent upon funding each year approved in the budget process. So again, my apologies for that confusion. We are not at the stage of the agreement being in front of you. We're at the stage of selecting Rimrock Foundation and Substance Abuse Connect's proposal. Last but certainly not least, and also kind of fitting for some of our conversations, a few weeks back I'd indicated, and the chief has been doing a great job giving me the information, and that is, I would quote a few numbers to you of what our officers experience out on the street. So as of October the 19th, our police officers in the city of Billings have interacted with 1,587 individuals in Billings, Montana, who had a warrant out for their arrest. That's 55 a week or 8 a day. Those individuals do not get arrested. There's no place for them to go. So they typically, almost all of them, receive a notice to appear in court. So 55 a week, 8 a day, or 1,587 times our officers are coming across individuals. The weak point in our system is not our officers not doing their jobs out on the street. That's one of the points here. It is not a breakdown in them doing their jobs. It is, however, the system from that point forward appropriately dealing with the consequences of behavior. So quoted that we would give those to you every few weeks and just kind of keep that out there as we continue to work with the county and the state of Montana relative to incarceration, as well as work with our community partners, because we do not believe that we can necessarily, or should we, be trying to incarcerate everybody. Those who truly have non-violent offenses, who have addiction or mental health issues, the jail or incarceration is not the place for them either. But right now, we do not have places. And thus, we're dealing with this problem over and over. I'm sorry, one last number I'll throw at you. I have not had it updated from the county attorney's office, but 6 or 8 weeks of data were consistent, so I'm going to suspect it's still consistent. Half of the felonies, 50% of the felonies that our county attorney's office deals with are from an individual who already committed another felony. They just haven't gotten into the court system or been adjudicated yet. So this issue of what to do with individuals who are making poor choices is definitely having a negative impact on our community safety. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Purington.
Thanks, Chris, for that figure. So on those that had warrants, are those nonviolent warrants?
I'm going to make the assumption that because what we hear the sheriff consistently say is if there is an individual whose violence necessitates them being incarcerated, they will make room for them. The tragedy, though, that I will say as a non-law enforcement agent is we know darn well, right? It doesn't happen until it happens. So I do believe that there's a risk there when we're not able to arrest. So a determination is made that the notice to appear is the only practical consequence or thing for the officer to do with that individual. If they were a violent criminal, they would, and that evidence would pass the threshold for the jail to book them and remit them to jail, and that does happen sometimes.
Okay, so that really didn't answer my question.
Okay.
So those 1,500-plus warrants that they come in contact with, are some of those violent as
My
well as
assumption is
not?
yes.
There's, the chief has.
Chief, you want to give some context? Thank you.
Mayor, Council, good evening. Yes, what you have here is just the total number that we're dealing with. In the November public safety presentation, we will break out exactly what those warrants are for. But your assumption is correct, that there are some warrants that are crimes against people. The things that take place that are really egregious and we get somebody picked up, they make room for those. But there are assaults that are out there that we pick up and can't get in jail, things of that. So this is just a total number.
Okay, that's fine.
If you can wait a couple weeks, we will have that broken out for you.
And along with those numbers, if I may, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
how many of those also that are committing violent crimes are pre-release?
I don't have that answer for you.
No, I don't expect you to have it right now, but I mean, if you could include that in your report.
Yeah, we'll definitely try. Some of these things are hard to get from our system.
Yeah.
It's not designed for that, and all of a sudden, we're trying to figure out why people aren't in jail. And so we'll provide some numbers for you. But trying to be respectful, mindful of Councilmember Rups's request on how many were like the minor traffic stuff that, really a non-issue, if you will. Councilmember Owens talking about juveniles, things like that. So we're trying to get that information for you, but I think you'll be relatively satisfied and shocked at the breakdown that we have for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Trickey and Councilor Rowan.
Just another impassable statistical request. If it's possible to boil that down to individuals as opposed to warrants, that would be useful.
Copy that.
Councilor Rowan?
Chief, this might be kind of an unsophisticated question, but when your officers are encountering these individuals, what warrants do they see? What jurisdictions are in front of them?
Well, we certainly get our local and statewide. Our system enables us to check nationally, if you will. And so what happens is that we will run an individual. If there is any type of warrant for them, we will be notified of that. A lot of times we'll have a match on the name, but they don't match to the physical description. So no, that's not it. Then you get instructions or directions on extradition, whether it's contiguous states, whether it's not, and then you're going to get a bond. If there's no bond, $1,500, $500, $20,000, those are the things that, the high bonds used to go in jail, and now they're not, unless they're, something significant. So we have all of that information at our fingertips through our mobile data terminals, through our dispatch center, through our clerical staff that throws that information out there. Here's who we have and who wants them. So we're getting multiple repositories.
So if there were a warrant in Carbon County or some adjacent county, you would see that?
Correct.
And that would have instructions on whether or not you're supposed to call that sheriff to come get the guy or whatever?
Correct.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess we'll continue. We've had our city administrator report. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to remove item 4 from the agenda.
Second by Councilmember Neese. Motion is clear. Any discussion? Then if in favor of the motion to remove item 4 from the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, nay. That motion passes. We just got rid of 25% of the night, folks.
Well,
Or so, something like that. That brings us then, anything else before we move to public comment on non-public hearing agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move then to opportunity for public comment on anything that there is not a public hearing scheduled for later. Tonight, that's item 1, our consent agenda. Item 4 is gone, so if anybody would like to comment on anything on our consent agenda, which is item 1, that includes all those subparts, A through O, now is your opportunity. Just ask that you come forward, tell us your name and address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment on item 1, our consent agenda? Before I close public comment, anybody coming forward? No one online? So we will close the public comment period on item 1 and move to item 1. For our consent agenda, council, are there any separations? Councilmember Boyette.
I'd like to separate 1B.
1B, professional services with Substance Abuse Connect. Okay, any further separations? Councilmember Neese.
1L.
1L, preliminary major plat, Buffalo Crossing subdivision. Any further separations? Before we proceed, okay, is there a motion concerning the non-separated items? Councilmember Shaw.
I move to approve the non-separated items of the consent agenda.
Second, Councilmember Gulick. Discussion. Any discussion, questions about the non-separated items? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. Seeing none. Motion is for approval of the non-separated items. If in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. First separated item is item 1B. Councilmember Boyette, would you like to start us off either with a motion, questions, or otherwise?
I guess, a big question, maybe for Chris. I think you and I have talked about this, but I read the proposal, and nowhere in here does it have Substance Abuse Connect doing anything. They don't do anything. Rimrock Foundation does everything. Why would we have an agreement with Substance Abuse Connect when they don't physically do anything? Just an observation. I've had 2 other people read it and say, why is their name even mentioned? That's my question.
So Substance Abuse Connect at this point is a coalition. It's a coalition of service providers. And when the board made the decision, or the executive committee, to submit a proposal, there were the potential that multiple members were looking at possibly partnering. They haven't. In this case, I don't know if in the end the agreement will just be between Rimrock and the city. That may be the place. That may be what ends up happening here. Or is there a legal technical role for Substance Abuse Connect? I don't have an answer to that kind of legal question, but you are correct. Substance Abuse Connect is not its own 501c3 or entity outside of a coalition of these groups. That, though, they are working to change that. They have received several grants, federal grants and pass-through grants, so I don't want to underplay their role either and their contractual relationship with the county relative to supplying similar services with the coalition and with members at the jail for mental health services. So kind of, if it's necessary to have SAC there, I'd say we would. If it's not, we won't. It may be directly between just Rimrock in this case as one service provider.
Okay, Councilmember Purington.
And that was one of my questions, is how would this MOU change? And I know we're not voting on the MOU, now I get that, because it's my understanding that Substance Abuse Connect is applying for their own nonprofit status. And how would that interplay with Rimrock? So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I put those forth in an email, so I'm not going to go through all those, but I think, I think Mike's question is legitimate at this point.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I move to approve item 1B of the consent agenda in following all of the recommendations on this pink sheet.
Okay, is there a second? Councilmember Rupsis? Councilmember Joy, I recognize you, but I'm going to ask, let Councilmember Shaw, if she wanted to speak to her motion, or Councilmember Rupsis, then we'll come back to you. Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Rupsis.
I would only ask, Chris, I think there are going to be a ton of operational questions about how this is going to work. And I wonder if we could get a work session scheduled on that, and tonight we can just focus on, the policy of what we're trying to do here with the contract, and then in a future session come back as we figure out logistically how this is all going to happen.
Happy to communicate that and also take advantage of this opportunity, per the conversations and preparation through all this work. Though we anticipate and see this as really becoming a best practice across the nation and providing this type of service, that being mental health professionals working alongside both law enforcement and or EMTs to better meet the needs of those dialing 911 or 988. Please don't mistake that to think there aren't going to be hiccups, things we learn going through as to how will this look and work and function in Billings, Montana. Billings, Montana is not Missoula, it's not Spokane, it's not, a Texas city of 1 million plus. But we are excited about this opportunity, and we're comfortable that we got a max funding at $250,000 from the city. That money is not going to flow to our partner, that's to supply services, and we'll gladly go over as we finish negotiating the contract and try to explain at a high level how will this service function, so that you as a policymaker and a citizen understand why we're investing in this.
Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Joy.
I will speak to this very quickly. Just to say, I know we went through some growing pains where we thought we might not have a partner in this. And so I'm just very happy that we saw 3 bids come back and that it looks like we will have a really good, strong partner in Rimrock. So I'm very thankful that they were willing to come back to the table to work with us. And I hope that this can be a really good partnership.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy, no. Councilmember Benicia, your hand up.
Yeah, and this may come back when we talk about some more operational stuff, but my concern is really the measurement of what the success is and when, whether or not we'll approve it in 2 years. And so that they know and we know that if they don't meet certain standards, then we go out for an RFP early enough, not just at the end of 2 years, but early enough so that we know that we can seek other people who can maybe have different ideas and different ways to attack this so it can be addressed sooner by the time the contract ends.
Thank you very much. Any further, well, we don't even have we do have a motion before us. Any further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Brown?
Only very briefly, I think we know and we've discussed that a lot of Chris's time has been taken up with this, but I think it's worth just recognizing how hard Chief Valdez and Assistant Chief Banfield have really worked to try to bring this to us. It isn't easy. I've had a lot of hard questions. I still have many questions to be answered. A lot of us do, but they've really worked hard. And I think it's worth recognizing that this is a significant milestone, and they've advocated hard for the city. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I appreciate their work on this. And Chief St. John as well, who has sort of long advocated for doing something different. And I think it's worth noting how hard those individuals have worked on behalf of the city.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? The only observation I would make is just a reminder to the public who might not know the details of this, that although we're potentially committing $250,000 to the partnership, we will definitely be the junior partner when it comes to funding. The Rimrock is talking about a $2 million contribution to this. And so we're very appreciative, just as it was said down there, that we've got a strong partner and we're lucky to have that. So hopefully we'll be able to work out the details of a more detailed agreement. Any further discussion before we move to a vote on that motion? Okay, the motion is for approval, again, not for any particular contract, but just to move ahead in negotiations toward a contract with Rimrock Foundation. If in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. So the next separated item was item 1L. Councilmember Neese, that was your separation. Would you like to start us?
Thank you, Mayor. I would. I think when we look at these, thank you. Was it buzzing? Mm-hmm. Okay. When we look at these minor plats, I think this is the time that we've always talked about, when do we jump in to make sure that the neighborhoods that are being developed across the city are really what we don't want to see developed. Often I hear from constituents about, different neighborhoods been developed, 20, 30, 40 years ago or more, and they're frustrated in the way it was developed. And so this is the time for us to do it. We haven't spent a whole lot of time on it. And I've emailed Wyeth back and forth on some of this stuff. And I think, Wyeth, do you have some information that you can share with us tonight as far as some of the different plats, where the park lanes are going to be? And then I had some questions regarding the accessibility between neighborhoods. And I think you kind of explained it to me, but I'm not so sure I like what I hear. But if you could kind of help us. And by the way, I didn't get the chance to read your email that came in at 3:15, so I don't know really what that contents really had. I just know it came in there, but I was already on my way to council early.
Okay, so council, mayor and Councilmember Neese, I guess, so first, just to sort of clarify in terms of where we are, preliminary major plat, this has gone through the staff review process, agency review process, went through our planning board. They make a recommendation to the council for preliminary plat approval. And then that, in this case, it's conditional approval, as you've seen from the memo. And then after that action occurs, you place those conditions on the plat, then the applicant can go back and prepare for final plat, where they actually come back, complete that, and that's when property is actually able to be sold and infrastructure and things like that are completed. So just to understand where we are, and certainly, I guess, just to also clarify that when the conditions of approval that are placed on subdivisions are tied to our criteria, and so we are looking at within those criteria, what's being mitigated, what are we addressing to make those conditions. And so when you see the conditions that are proposed already on this, that's where those are coming from across our criteria. And if you look in our findings of fact that's attached to the memo, then you see all the different criteria areas. So just wanted to clarify with that. I guess actually what I can do real quick is pull up the plat. And because I want to there was a lot of things that I followed up back to the council and to Councilmember Neese on Friday, and then a little bit more today. And so we could spend a lot of time there. So I guess I'll just walk through a couple things.
I was surprised to see you sitting there, Chris.
What's that?
I was surprised to see you sitting there. That's what mine does whenever it kicks on. Turn it.
So, we try, I don't know if I zoom out a little bit more here. It's moving really slow, sorry about that. So you all have, you all have this in your packet too, so, and hopefully at least taking a look at it. I'll just point out a couple things real quick. And so the questions that all of you received from last Friday, and then a little bit that I followed up this afternoon, which was mainly just some clarifications. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Gulick, and I believe Councilmember Chiriki also, all of you had a few different questions that I was helped respond to. And I responded to you, but it wasn't just me. It was City Public Works, Engineering, Planning, and Parks. So it was a group effort. So this is the Buffalo Crossing plat as proposed for preliminary plat approval. One of the questions was regarding access
to the west, specifically to future property to the west and development. And when this council back in March reviewed the planned neighborhood development, zoning, and annexation, and there was quite a bit of discussion at that meeting regarding access, especially to the west in that situation. And so what's happened since then, working with the developer and city staff through the subdivision process, is that we've ended up with a full road connection about midpoint here. There's a pedestrian connection that goes all the way across from the Byerly, from the east side of the property to the west, and then Stockman Avenue, which is a collector coming through in this location. The Stockman does go down slightly southwest, and I explained that in the email. The reason for that is we've got both the Byerly drain and another drain coming in here, and from a engineering and kind of design standpoint, having that hit those at 90 across instead of trying to come across off over here at an angle was the reason for that. So it comes out here, it's a collector. That doesn't mean that it isn't going to serve property to the west and not connect in. It just means that it comes across in that location. So we ended up with a connection here, another connection here, trail pedestrian connection here, and then obviously Grand Avenue to the north. So that's the layout in terms of how this subdivision connects to property to the west, and obviously east-west also with Stockman, because that feeds into Trails West subdivision down here at the bottom. That was one question in terms of the layout. Another question was regarding the parks and locations of parks. And basically this subdivision has proposed both a linear park area here with the trail corridor adjacent to the Byerly Drain, pedestrian, this linear connection here, and some park area right here, which, as I also explained in that email, there is currently a drain for ag land here that feeds into the Byerly Drain, and the design here was to provide a space for where that's located for now, but also an open space so that ultimately both when the drain, I mean, you can walk there now, but the drain is obviously there as well. When the drain goes away, that remains as open space, and it actually connects with the pedestrian east-west down and then back over to Stockman. And so it creates a space here. And there's the potential for future development, open space to the west as well. But those are those areas. We are going to follow up with the developer about labeling in terms of this is labeled as park and this the park trail. This says lot 13, and we're just going to get clarification to make sure we have that properly labeled there. But that's where the trail would be, and there's requirements for construction of the trail. The biggest probably other conversation or questions that came up was regarding connectivity across the Byerly Drain for pedestrian, some kind of pedestrian connection, and this was talked about throughout the emails and stuff the last several days. And basically what you've got is there's a pedestrian connection coming off here that comes right up in this location, which actually lines up approximately with a pedestrian connection in Trails West subdivision. What I've shared and what staff shared with you in the last couple days is that there's not currently a mechanism with the subdivisions to construct that a bridge potentially over the Byerly. There's also the Byerly Drain currently right now. There's a district and group a board that oversees it. They would have to obviously approve anything at this time that might go there. But there are options for constructing that bridge. I would say, there's options regardless of what you do tonight, but there's also an option that feeds into what you do tonight. If you wanted to add an additional condition to kind of specify how this subdivision might participate in that construction. And I've got, if that's where the council wants to go, we have a draft condition that we can put up to have you take a look at so that it kind of helps with that idea if the council wants to take that, go that direction. So that was, like I said, probably the biggest conversation and information back and forth that we had from the last couple of days. There was also a question on block face length regarding the zoning code, and I did that I sent out later this afternoon. So we have this connection here, we have this pedestrian connection here, and then basically when you're looking at the zoning, the block face averaging, you're basically going from where the road basically from here to here, because of this is a different street and that's the block, quote unquote. So it's a little weird because of the curves, but that's it. So basically we do have less than 800 feet from here to this full access, less than 800 feet to this pedestrian access, less than 800 feet to where it turns right there and Stockman is. So they are set up regarding that for the zoning. We certainly are looking at, when we come to you with some zoning code amendments, some clarification of the language in that section, because we've run into this on a couple of projects in terms of just being clear about what that means, and also the way it's called out now regarding street versus pedestrian facilities and being clear about that. So this is working and the way the code is now, but we are going to bring some language to try to, get that a little clearer, because we had this conversation on another one too, where it was not clear, and it was also, and the issue of full street versus pedestrian facility as well. I think those were the main.
We're going to turn it over to, while you look, Wyeth, Councilmember Neese, did you have a follow-up on what you've just heard?
Yeah, I think if Wyeth is done, I think on the block face you were just finished up, I would say that I look forward to those changes, because it did make sense to me that you would start really. Again, I know it's a curve, but that's part of the block, and you start, and so really there's quite a bit of I think I measured it 1,000 feet from, and I measured at the corner. If you started from Grand down to the next street, it's well over 1,000 feet, and I also wasn't aware pedestrian crossings are considered would then restart that block count again, and I'm not so sure I like that idea. I think mid blocks are helpful. Maybe maybe in a case like this where it wouldn't make sense to put two streets in because you're going to be, only 600 feet each block or something, then there could be some kind of policy written in there that says if you're under this amount or over this amount, you can put in a pedestrian. But to me, it seems like the two streets could easily fit in here and not been pedestrian walkway. That's just my comments on that. But thank you for explaining that, because I didn't realize that. On the pedestrian walkway, I'm a little concerned about that, because when we talk about some sub-TEB policies, I'm not so sure our sub-TEB policies are actually in the subdivision code about this, because, for instance, we've heard some comments about the Kiwanis Trail. Everyone's built fences along the side, you can't see anything, and suddenly eyes are off the trail. And kids are afraid to go on the trail unless there's lots of people there, because, there's no one can see what's going on. And so I think that we need to start instilling, and maybe even amend this to have some sub-TED, when you have these pedestrian trails that are going behind the houses like this or between houses, that you have some restrictions, similar to like in a golf course. If you're on the golf course, you can't build a high fence, or it's got to be a see-through fence or something like that. It has to be some type of fencing, if you're going to put fence up there, that it has to be at a low height so people can actually see the trails. And so I think that's something that we should amend tonight, because we're putting a lot of pedestrian trails through there that is going to possibly create these blind alleyways that, people aren't going to be able to see. So that's on the pedestrian. So I like the idea of the trails, but the other thing I look at is they're on the southern trail there, where they cut through all three blocks there. It's really nice, kind of mid-block crossing. I can see that. Actually, in my neighborhood I grew up, we had a trail like that. It was nice. But this trail here, when I go to the west, it goes to that drain. I don't know how usable it is and that, but in the future, someone else is going to develop to their west, and now you got a trail, just like we have from Trails West development, who goes right to the Byerly Drain, stops, and no one thought in the future that, hey, this may cross the Byerly Drain. Maybe we should have a clause in here that if there's a development to the west, we should actually have a connection there. And I think we need to think further in the future when we're putting things like this in. So if we've got this pedestrian street going off to that little drain, say, okay, that's fine. You don't have to put a bridge there now, but when it comes time for development to come in next to it, then you need to be able to provide connection, because right now Trails West is saying, well, we don't have to provide a connection unless the city council forces an SID and says we're going to do it, and then they have to pay for it. So I think on both sides, on this one and for the trail that could potentially connect to Trails West, and if I'm confusing people, I'll take Mayor's pointer and point to it. Okay. Mayor, how do you work this? Okay, so this trail here, in the future, this may connect to Trails West. And so I think we should see your proposed language to condition the trail that if a trail comes through here, that they would pay their share of it. And then Trails West, we'd have to force an SID, or like you suggested, maybe use some park money in lieu of to help fund that. And then this trail down here, it goes right into this drain. Again, should condition this plat to include the fact that if this trail, if someone develops over here, that this is connected over to this side. So there's another connectivity to the next trail system over here, but they have to pay for whatever it's going to cost to build the bridge. Or if this is vacated, then fill it in and, make a walkway through there. Am I making myself clear enough on that?
Yeah, no, you're making yourself clear. Yep.
Wyeth, if I can follow up then a little bit about procedure here. I'm very sympathetic to connectivity and including pedestrian connectivity. We want to make sure that our subdivision regulations require that just as much as they require road connectivity. I don't know if you can comment if that's the case. Hopefully they are clear on that. And in this particular case, it'd be great to make sure we had those connections and do whatever we can in the subdivision improvement agreement to make sure we do. Subject to the reality that this is pretty late in the process. In fact, can you comment on the 60-day review requirement for subdivisions? And we have to fish or cut bait on this in the next 5 hours, correct? Because if we don't, then it's deemed automatically approved because today is our last day for approval. Is that correct?
Council, or Mayor and Council, so the 60 working day preliminary plat review period does end today, the 24th. And so this is the day for you to take action. I mean, there's a couple things, but so I guess that's the first thing. Yes, you would take action tonight, which is why it's here for you tonight, fitting in with our schedule. There's the potential to extend that if at the basically agreement between you and the developer. So that's always an option. We've had that happen before and happened also back at during our planning board stage. And then technically, I'm going to have to consult, I think briefly with Monica, but the state law allows up to 80 days for major plats.
I think now, there's not a lots here.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes this rushed last minute drafting is a great way to create problems for everybody.
Well, so I guess, excuse me, we can certainly, if you're interested in the condition that we've drafted, it's been through quite a bit of review, including I shared it with the applicants. Well, we emailed with them this afternoon and then shared it with them as well. So there has been some review and such. So I guess it's your discretion based on mitigating.
I think unless a clear majority of the council doesn't want to hear that, we should at least ask staff to tell us what they've got. I see some nodding heads. Wyeth, go ahead.
So Mayor and Council, this is the draft language. Again, we're looking at specifically, and this is specifically to the crossing on the Byerly Drain, which is the very large drain between Trails West and this subdivision where the trails literally are built to connect to each other there.
So it's be on the east side of this particular subdivision.
Right. And basically, the language is proposed to say to minimize the effects on local services and provide additional public access between neighborhoods. Prior to final plat approval, language will be added to the SIA. Again, the SIA for Buffalo Crossing subdivision, what is on your agenda tonight, to the transportation section, that the developer will provide up to 50% of the cost of a pedestrian bridge across the Byerly Drain in the general area of the drain east of Lot 11, Block 8. Contribution will occur when the city of Billings secures encroachment of the bridge over the drain and the city initiates an SID for construction of the pedestrian bridge, applies part cash in lieu funds to pay for the bridge, or applies a combination of these funding mechanisms to build the bridge. So the idea here is, and and visiting with, there's some concern regarding right now the Byerly Drain Board and their control and what they would or wouldn't allow. So we're trying to be very careful here that it's the city that's going to initiate this. We're not trying to put the developer in a situation where they can't get it secured, because right now the Byerly is saying one thing and later we may be able to work out something else. So we want to be clear about that. And then also the combination of funding sources. So it's not this developer and this subdivision would contribute, but until we actually launch that construction and SID or the funding mechanism, we would then determine all the contributions. There is cash in lieu that's been provided by Trails West in previous filings, and they're going to be providing more cash in lieu for their 6th filing, which is the last filing down where Stockman Avenue connects. So there's a variety of sources there. So this is what we've proposed to cover that, and then.
Okay, and other council, I'm sure will have some questions, but I just want to make sure I understand. Is this saying that the 50% not covered by the developer is to come from an SID and or cash in lieu funds? That's what those, does it say from Trails West?
No, he said it.
You said it, but it doesn't say it.
Well, an SID would be, right, the creation of the SID would be potentially Trails West. There's multiple filings. We would create an SID for Trails West to contribute if that's the route that we ended up taking. We would have up to 50% from this development. It's not saying it is 50%, it's up to 50% depending on the combination of funds and then also the cash in lieu. So it's keeping it as open there in terms of everyone's contribution as possible for the funding.
Okay, so it's not a situation where the Buffalo Trail, Buffalo Crossing people would be subject to the SID and the developer had to pay 50%. We're just looking at ways to find the other 50% from other sources.
Correct.
Okay. Well, Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Owen, Councilmember Gulick.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Director Friday, are there any other drains that the city has built pedestrian crossings over in the city?
Councilmember Joy and Mayor and Council, there are several that that have had bridges built across them. I can't say that the city built them, but I can tell two of them. One is Norm's Island. There's a prefab span. It's been there for many years down that accesses across the drain. There's a drain canal that comes off the Yellowstone River over down by the Audubon Society, and there's a bridge there. And then more recently, the McCalls and Cal Kunkel put a prefabricated span over the Hogan Slough next to Elysian Road, separated from the road completely. It's its own bridge that crosses, and the pedestrian path uses that span to get from the east to the west of the Hogan Slough. So those are a couple of similar situation like this.
Follow up, Mayor.
Councilor Joy.
Thank you. So if the law, a state law on ditches and drains has been something that council doesn't know a lot about. Well, we know something about it just because we have the BBWA that constantly gives us some amount of headache. What would, if the city is responsible for putting this as a condition, what liability does the city then take on for the maintenance condition or any mitigating anything that would in some way damage the drain? Thank you.
Councilmember Joy and Mayor and Council, I guess I can speak to the fact that we have, that in terms of the bridge and the trail connection and all, that would be not unlike any other trail, public trail that we have and access that we have in the city now that we are, quote unquote, responsible for to whatever extent that is. I don't put City Attorney Dahl on the spot. I guess in terms of the drain situation, I don't know what, we would have to work with the drain to install the bridge to make sure it didn't create any issues with their drain. So I don't know, aside from that, what else we would be subject to after that was completed. So that's all I can say.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Councilmember Owen.
Mayor, my question relates to the trails. If other council members wanted to talk about the Byerly drain crossings more, I'd be happy to hold.
Okay, the trails connecting to the west. Is that true?
The one through and then the one to the east.
Okay, we'll try to focus on Byerly and come back to Councilmember Rowan. Councilmember Kulik?
Yeah, just back to, Wyeth, could you put the image back up of the neighborhood, just the plat? Just to give some perspective on the scale, we're talking about the plat is for a neighborhood that's running from Grand Avenue almost the length to Broadwater. And so it's a long distance. And so it is important to have some connectivity. Typically, if they weren't a Byerly drain, we would have at least another street, one more street. This is going to be a lot less expensive probably than a street. And we also have another example of a bridge like this right next to Meadowlark School through Lillis Park that crosses the ditch there. That's also a similar distance. That's between Broadwater and Central. So I think this is very analogous. What we're asking of the developer here to provide is very similar as other places. Again, trying to make it easy for kids to get to school. Walkability is really important. I think this is something we should be doing. So I appreciate staff for bringing that forward as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Kulik. Or I'm sorry, Councilmember Rupsis.
Thank you. I like the approach, and I like the putting in the clause in there that allows us to pay for that. My question really just had to do with cash in lieu, and I thought everything in that area, we had an agreement that all cash in lieu funds from there would go to the development of Cottonwood Park. It's been in place, I think, for 20 years. Are we concerned at all about possibly diverting those funds to this? I didn't really think cash in lieu would be an option here.
Councilmember Rupsis and Mayor and Council, I don't know if Mr. Whitaker would like to get into the detail of that. I know you have to make sure that it's benefiting those subdivisions in that area. I guess I'm not aware in this case that all that, the cash pieces that Trails West was contributing would go all to the Cottonwood Park.
I thought there was a radius around Cottonwood
Yeah,
Park.
Mr. Whitaker is here, and it's a mile and a half.
Yeah.
Mayor and council, no, we cannot deviate from the agreement as relates to the cash in lieu dollars that goes to Cottonwood. I believe the service radius is a mile and a half. If this falls within the mile and a half, it has to go to Cottonwood. If it's outside of this, we did check that there's a total of $15,000 in cash in lieu that could be used for this if it doesn't fall within that radius. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
My guess is it's within that radius, but I don't know. Yeah. Councilmember Rowan, if you want to come back and we'll.
Thanks. So Wyeth, I wanted to talk a little bit about the issue that Councilmember Neese brought up with regards to SEPTED, the pedestrian trail sort of through the middle and then that diagonal connection there. I mean, he's right. If those are all 6-foot fences, the whole way you sort of create these tunnel effects, and that can create danger. And I don't think we want to do that. As a matter of fact, council adopted unanimously an amendment to incorporate SEPTED principles throughout our community. And I know you're working on updating subdivision regulations, and you can't do everything in a matter of months, and I get that. So we have a little bit of a problem here, in my opinion. I don't think we want to approve something that has the potential to incorporate problematic design into the community. At the same time, we don't want to draft it on the fly, because the solution could be different types of fencing, the solution could be lighting, there could be multiple solutions. So do we have a way to solve this? Can we include a condition that says something like, pedestrian trails will have a SEPTED analysis and comply with cost-effective recommendations or something? I mean, is there a way to include something that is thoughtful, but makes it clear that we don't want to create sort of chutes that make people uncomfortable? And in point of fact, these internal pedestrian trails might feel very different than the trail along the drain, because that might be much wider and much more open. These could be very narrow. So I don't want to do something off the cuff, but I also don't want us to further institutionalize a problem that we know needs to get addressed. So, I know we're up against a deadline. I'm not crazy about that. It looks like it sat for a month between planning committee before it came here. So we could have seen it earlier, but I don't want to create chaos right now. But what are our options?
Yeah, good questions.
We have a draft, if you want me to run it.
You have a draft?
We do have
A draft of what?
as you can see, which I promote very well, is that our directors, we all should challenge each other, right? Be concerned. So Wyeth has every right to like, well, what are you about to say? So this is on the fly, because, right, we did this just sitting here, but it would be Section 2, property conditions and information for lot purchasers. So it's in the SIAs. Any lot adjacent to an improved trail within the development is not permitted to construct a solid fence adjacent to the linear trail. Rear yard fences that allow for visibility would be permitted. All fences will require fence permits from the City of Billings Planning Division.
Is this a new subsection? You're not amending one that exists? This is like a J?
No, it's amending an existing section.
Yeah, you would, sorry, hi.
Hi.
It's actually really hard to sit back there and because I would say things different than, or not, we would say the same thing, but just differently, so I'm having fun back there. Anyhow, what you would do is in the SIA under section 2, it would just be a new letter.
This is a new J, right?
It would be, yep, that would be their recommendation. And I will say also in the, very brief conversation that Chris and I had in developing this solution on the fly is that, quite honestly, I have a little bit of heartburn with it because if we start one-offing SIAs and we have a zoning code that allows for fences, when we have somebody that just walks in to get their fence permit across the counter, we do not do research for SIAs. That is not something that is even in the scope of a fence permit. So I am okay with it if you have to have it tonight, but it is not the solution, and I do want to be very clear about that.
I don't disagree with you. I'm not convinced that in all cases fencing would be the solution. There might be other solutions that make sense
Right.
based on the community design. So I'm not persuaded either, and I agree with you. This should be in our subdivision rules, not here. At the same time, we don't come back to this, do we?
You would not.
This is done.
Yeah, you would not have an opportunity for further conditions of approval. The way that it works is the developer has to meet the obligations of the conditions that you put in place with preliminary plat. They have up to 3 years to do that. And when you approve final plat, you have no chance for a second bite at the apple for conditions. So it's what is decided here.
Monica, if I can put a question to you about the process here. In the SIA, every SIA, there's also a generic requirement, I assume, that the developer will comply with all city land use regulations in effect, or something generic like that.
Well, I think what you're remembering, Mayor, if I may, is we actually have a condition of approval that is more like a catch-all approval that says, this application and this development is subject to all other rules and regulations of the city of Billings and administrative rules of the state of Montana and anything else under the sun. So that's
Right.
specific
So
to
those
the application.
requirements then would be a requirement of compliance upon final plat approval. This is preliminary plat approval. What about if we were just to revise the SIA to say that the developer will comply, well, that there's a possibility of an amendment of our subdivision regs when it comes to fencing or zoning, where they abut a trail. You're on notice, and the developer commits to comply with any such future regulations if they come into existence before the developer applies for a building permit for that fence. If they can beat us to it, okay. But that way, if there are regulations, they will have to comply. They can't claim that they were grandfathered by this SIA approval if we actually do adopt such regulations in the future.
Mayor, the subdivision improvement agreement is a binding contract between the developer and the city. Fence permits are installed by landowners and homeowners, not the developer. So unless the developer were creating an entire, fence corridor along that trail, that's really not a feasible solution.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. That's what it really is a contract initially with the developer and the city, which then becomes binding on everybody who follows it thereafter. And so it runs with the land and would bind the future property owners, and they would have to make sure that they complied with those fencing regulations when they went to get the building permit.
I agree that it can be transferred in whole or in part, especially when developments are left not finalized, or there are improvements that are remaining. But I'll just leave it at that.
No, it's a very important point, though. I mean, are you saying there are parts of our SIA that are not binding upon future lot owners?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, are you saying that if we were to do this, it wouldn't be binding on future lot owners?
I think we've done some things in our SIA because of this very reason, that every homeowner is not responsible for something that the developer up and walks away from. We have an agreement with the developer that we can go after the developer to keep their obligations. We don't go after the homeowners after the fact to keep the developer's obligations. I believe there are parts that do transfer, such as our waiver of right to protest, but that's not a part of the SIA. It's a waiver attached to the SIA that does talk about, transferring and not being able to protest. So we have been very specific. I believe you were even part of one of our latest amendments in our SIA of Section 2 and how we title it, of property conditions and information for lot purchasers, because it is a contract with the developer. So I just don't think it's a simple answer. It would be highly unusual that we would go into a development after the fact, use the SIA as, a means to have homeowners do something outside of the scope of an SID. That's how those SIAs are used, is specifically with the developer.
Okay, Councilmember Purinton.
Well, just as a question to you, would that not be part of the covenants that the subdivision would adopt, which I guess we really don't have any control over?
Yeah, we can't control that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would say if we were to adopt these regulations later, as long as it's done before the homeowner has to go in and get a permit, they should be bound by it. What I was talking about is putting something in the SIA that says, don't make the argument that you didn't know about it. Because it's of record, they should know about it, that this is coming down the pike. Whether that's absolutely necessary or not, I don't know, but, we could still amend our regulations.
Would they have to create their homeowners association to meet the SIA as well?
Only if our SIA required that, and it doesn't, so.
If I may, while it may feel a little on the fly, I think the language that Chris read about adding a new J that would basically address visibility for those fences adjacent to the trail, I think is really the best option for tonight. I appreciate where our conversation's going, and I think it's worthy of a subsequent conversation outside of just this development. But I do think it achieves visibility and would not get, those walled off alleys that are quiet and don't feel very safe. So I guess I would just like to reinforce that. And then in the meantime, I know you guys know we are working on the subregs as well as zoning regulations. And so, message heard, incorporate SubTed. That these are policy type things that we can work on. It's very hard to apply policy in the actual review of the development that doesn't exist yet. So I really think while it's not perfect, I think it does achieve some good.
Thank you. And just a reminder to staff, we do have the agent for the developer here who may want to comment about these fencing issues and also the bridge issue as well. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Monica. Didn't have to celebrate when I get your name right. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, can you comment, because again, I don't like to make changes on the fly either, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to it sooner than that, but it would be nice if we can actually have these preliminaries come to us during work sessions so we can actually have good conversation about them. But let's talk about the trail to the west. Where their future land will be. When Trails West built theirs, no one even thought about the trail that ended at Byron Lane. No one ever thought that it should ever cross. Now we're thinking, wow, we got a good connectivity. There's a school just down the block from them. We needed that connectivity. We're going to have a subdivision probably go to the west of there and develop. How do we now, unfortunately on the fly, to make this development be able to, when it's time, when that other development goes in, make connectivity through that pedestrian trail as well. I'm assuming they have to do to the streets, right? They have to connect to the streets. Is there anything in the development agreement that says they have to connect to pedestrian trails as well to the west, going west over that drain?
Council member Neese, as far as a connection to the west, I do not believe so for the pedestrian. The streets, yes, if council wanted to make those connections to all adjacent undeveloped properties that may cross a drain, to basically apply that same language in the SIA, that would be very easy to do. When we have infrastructure improvements that go to the property line, that is a very clear signal that it is intended to be connected to. And so it just like how, we're having Stockman come through and not having Stockman stop, it is up to Trails West to connect Stockman all the way to their property and then for this development to take it. So that right there signals that when that property comes into the west, whatever is built up to that property line that they need to connect to, and they need to design their streets and their infrastructure accordingly to be able to make those connections.
But in this case, this pedestrian on the south there doesn't, it stops at the drain, and it doesn't connect to the property line. And so what can we do during this approval process to put in, similar to what YF presented to us, this one for the Barley drain? What's the name of that other drain to the west, do you know?
It's just an unnamed drain.
Yeah, Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council, I guess the thing that's very different about these is that the drain that we're talking about on the west is a drain for the property, it's just a smaller drain off of the fields that are right there. It's nothing at all like the Byerly or the Hogan Slough. So the understanding here is if development occurs on the west, that drain then is gone because that's where that's what it was pulling off of. So it will cease to operate when that occurs. So the trail is actually currently connecting to parkland. It's not connecting, the parkland currently has a drain in it, but it is parkland. So in the future, that's going to be a trail connecting to parkland, and then you're going to have parkland adjacent to that future development. And that's what I mentioned in the email, was that then obviously if you've got development occurring right there, you're going to be looking at how do those connect with the parkland adjacent. So anyway, it's a lot different than what we're talking about crossing the Byerly.
Well, I think it's similar in the sense that, because remember that connectivity there is meeting the 800-foot block face. And so it's meeting the connectivity requirements, which because they're putting that pedestrian crossing there, unless they connect it to the other side, that the future development, then, it just kind of ends there. And then those people, they can go into the park and kind of loop back around, but they could also be just back of houses in that whole section. And there's really no connectivity there to the adjacent neighborhood.
Well, I guess the council can, if you think that there's an issue there that you need to mitigate beyond what we're saying, which is it connects to the parkland, it does get to the behind those properties and connects to a piece of open space. We could look at that. We don't, I think in terms of bridges and things, it's a really different situation compared to the Byerly.
It'd be less expensive if they did have to build that in the future. Okay.
Okay, Council, just a reminder, we're still on item 1. So we'll have to bring some resolution, these two issues to the west and to the east. We've got two kind of proposals out there. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve item 1L, including both of the amendments proposed by staff. So the one that Wyeth circulated and the one that Monica read that was drafted on the fly, which I think is a not bad hybrid to get us where we might want to go. But I do look forward to seeing the substantial changes that would put this in place in perpetuity. So.
Second.
Okay, and second by Councilmember Neese. Discussion on the motion. I recognize Councilmember Treaky, but then I also want staff, I guess I'd suggest we give the developer's agent an opportunity to come up and comment, and I'll do that unless somebody objects after Councilmember Treaky.
I just wanted to make one small comment about this. I totally believe that we do need to have trails that connect, pedestrian bike trails and all that connect. But if we're going to do it on a subdivision by subdivision basis, it's never going to work. We need to sit down and come up with a larger overall plan for how to connect all of these neighborhoods that are being developed as their own little subdivisions that are in there. I mean, if you look at the plat what's already designed for Trails West, there's another little pedestrian outlet there that's going into a field that will someday be developed. But, neither side of that is going anywhere. So the only value of these pedestrian accesses right now is getting onto the drain, the park that's becoming a drain that's in there. So I will vote for this, but honestly, I think that the bottom line is that if we want connected trails across the city, we need to sit down and come up with a plan for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, I'm just going to invite developers, agent. You've heard the discussion, I hope?
I have been listening to the discussion.
Yeah, so if you just want to introduce yourself and comment.
Yeah, Doug Wild with Buffalo Crossing. One comment about the SID going over the drain. I think if the city can get Byerly Drain to agree to a crossing and they create an SID, I think it's totally appropriate for us to waive our opportunity to contest that SID. I think it's a great option. Good luck on getting the Byerly to agree to that. It's hard out there, but I think it's a great crossing. In relation to the fencing along the park paths, if you look back at that drawing, those sections aren't long. And so to put some stipulation that any fence along the path or parkway there would need to have a see-through fence or a shorter fence, I think isn't consistent with what's been going on in the city. And I realize you're trying to change that, but it's not changed. And so we've been going at it with this premise. So if you're saying that I can't put a fence, a 6-foot privacy fence that honestly everybody wants along the entire Byerly Drain, because there's a path there, I think that's not okay. I think that decreases the value of those properties. And it's not consistent with what the city's been doing, nor with what the city necessarily is going to do in the future, because there's no rule stating such. Also, the small section that crosses through the block face break there, it's a 20-foot wide pathway. It's not, a sidewalk with a fence on both sides. It's 20 feet wide. It's the same width as a city alley with an 8-foot path through it. And they're 2-yard depths deep. And so the longest that fence section is going to be is 150 feet long by the time you take out front yard and front yard. So it's not a block long section of skinny corridor fence that's creepy and scary. I don't think that's the case either. But I know if I were going to buy that and I had a dog that barked, I'd want a solid fence or I wouldn't buy it. So you're creating a value issue there for something that's, again, not consistent with what the city's been doing and not. I get the privacy factor. I totally do. I don't think this specific instance really qualifies for that because they're not particularly long, deep, scary, long corridors. Is I guess my thoughts there.
Doug, if I can ask you a question, ask staff to put back on the language about the Byerly drain, bridge. My reading that you kind of put that in terms that you didn't see any problem with waiving your right to object to an SID. What I'm reading there is that the developer will provide 50% of the cost of the bridge.
Once the city has that in place. So if you do get that in place while I still own all the lots, by all means, I'll pay half because the SID would be my half. I would own all of those lots. But if you can't get that in place and I own half of the lots, then I don't really have a way to recoup that. Or if I don't own any of those lots and you get that done 10 years from now, I have no way to pay for that. I'm not there anymore. And so really the only mechanism is to create that SID. Whereas if I did own all of those lots, then the burden would fall on me. Or try to sell a lot with an SID on it, but you all know I end up paying them off anyway.
Okay, and since you're signing a waiver anyway of SIDs, you're already stuck with that.
That's my understanding. So if there's an SID assessed to a specific pedestrian bridge, then I would be stuck for it.
Yeah, so if this is only intended to get what we already have, I don't see that we're getting anything. See the concern?
Well, and I don't see, like I said, I don't know how easy it would be to get an approval from the Byerly to make that crossing happen. We've had some difficulty in getting the crossing at Stockman dealt with the Byerly drain. I mean, you guys have dealt with ditch boards and drains, you get it. But the reality that will happen is not there. So for me to go in and say, okay, here's my 50% to put that in, if that never happens, what does that money where does that money go? So really the mechanism I see is create an SID to put that crossing in.
Okay. And you understand the value of it, so if.
I think it's a good thing, but I just can't do it.
Okay, anything for the developer or developer's agent, or we can let him sit down? Anything else? Okay, thank you, Doug. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to split the question, and I think that's the terminology. I would like the two amendments to be split so that approval, the vote is for either on the Byerly Crossing amendment or the amendment to the fencing issue. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm not sure procedurally, but if it's just a friendly amendment by the movant, which was Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Bernice, we could take these one at a time. Councilmember Shaw says that's okay with her. Councilmember Bernice, it was your second. And if so, which one did you want to proceed with first?
Couldn't she just make an amended motion with what she wants instead of, because it's one question, but if you want to.
Yeah, I guess it'd be sort of a substitute motion because it would get rid of half of the, so,
yeah.
okay, we'll call it a substitute motion if that's what you want to do, Councilmember Joy. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I would like to make a substitute motion to to approve the Buffalo Crossing plat condition as it's written up here for Byerly Drain Crossing.
I have a point of order question. We can't make amendments to substitute motions, is that right?
That's correct.
So we couldn't vote on amendments after passing that?
We could not vote on an amendment to her substitute motion. I'm going to look for my parliamentarian here in just a second. But I guess so. Do you want to just tell us what it is? Because she might just voluntarily amend her motion if there was something.
Well, no, I think what you were trying to get at is let's have votes on the amendments separately. And my point is we won't even be able to vote on the amendments if we move forward with a substitute motion. Does that make sense? I think.
This would be, as I was understanding, just a motion to approve this amendment to the SIA.
Yes.
Does that answer your question? We still would have to come back to approve the SIA, the amended SIA. The simplest thing would be if you just withdrew your motion.
I'm fine with that.
And she will make,
yes.
Councilmember Joy will make a motion.
Let's just do that. Let me just withdraw the motion. Let's keep it simple.
Okay, and Councilmember Neese, is that okay with you?
Neese, we're withdrawing our
motion. The request
motion.
is to just withdraw your motion so Councilmember Joy can proceed with these two issues one at a time. Okay, thank you. So that's the case, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I move that we approve the SIA Buffalo Crossing subdivision with an amendment to have a Buffalo Crossing condition for a Byerly Drain crossing.
Okay, and I apologize. If that then passes, are we done? Because I think there's still a desire to come back to the.
It could be amended again.
Motion for an
Mayor.
amendment, right?
Okay, so we'll make, okay, well, that's how we'll deal it. Okay, so the current motion is for approval of item 1L with only this amendment to the proposed SIA. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, Councilmember Shaw. Discussion on your motion, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think that the proposal for a crossing over the Byerly Drain, even though the condition, the challenge may be having the agreement of the Byerly Drain Board might be an issue. I think it's very clear that this is a good solution to an issue of connectivity. I don't think that we should amend SIAs or have this kind of process for subdivisions in the future. I'm looking forward to regulations that really address better connectivity. So maybe that takes in half-time an FTE, a 0.5 FTE to help us sit down and figure out how do we make these things connect? How do we make trails connect? Because that is a very important issue. It's something that we're really aiming to do with the city. We don't build a trail to have it end in a fence. We don't build a trail to have it end at a ditch. We're building trails in order to connect them. So maybe it would take someone to actually have that as their job description to figure out how we make these things connect better. And acknowledging the challenge of getting the approval, I think that this is a good solution to that challenge of connectivity. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Purington, again, the motion is for approval of SIA with this language. Councilmember Purington.
Second, right?
Yes, and it did have a second. Yes.
Okay. So the only question I have with this is what Mr. Wild just said about the portion where the developer will provide up to 50% of the cost, because he may or may not be even in Buffalo Crossing whenever that happens. So does that portion of that statement need to be changed?
Who would you like to answer that question? I think I raised the issue. I have some concerns about, I have more than some concerns about that.
I'll take a stab at that. I don't believe that the language would need to be changed, because the reality is that there's going to be a point in time where the Byerly Drain either provides their approval for that encroachment of a facility over their drain, or they're no longer using the drain for what it's used for, and perhaps there's another entity that owns it, like the city. And it would be that type of action that would allow for it to then be constructed, and it would be constructed with an SID, which has the waiver, in which all of those lot owners in the future would be subject to. So the important thing to remember about conditions of approval is that if we put a condition in that simply just said they need to make this connection and the Byerly Drain said no, then this development is no longer feasible and has no way of reaching final plat. This language is specifically designed to avoid that type of scenario, because it would be very unfair to hinge a development on a third party of which do not play by the same rules that we do. But I feel comfortable that the SID mechanism, regardless of what time, would be achievable. So I don't think that we're saying Mr. Wild has to contribute his 50% tomorrow and it just sits there. There has to be a mechanism to allow that encroachment, and until we have that, we can't go for either of these three or a combination of those three solutions.
Okay, Councilmember Denise, Councilmember Rowan, did you have your hand up? Councilmember Denise?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Monica, Wyeth, whoever helped with this, thank you for putting this together. I think this is a good start, but like you say, it's going to be in our code soon. I think I'll support this motion, even though I think even though you tried to put together something for the SEPTEB on the fencing and the alleys, I think there's some issues there that maybe down the road that we can get our fencing code to actually have that in there. I think that would probably be a more appropriate way, so that when they go to pull the permit, they got to abide by the SEPTEB policies at that time. So we may be able to actually still get what we're doing here, because a high fence may be the appropriate way with lighting. So you may want to light the area and not have a see-through fence. And so I think we need to really take some of those principles into account and not just try to fix one. Because again, as much as we tried, I think we sometimes doing stuff on the fly, we're not thinking all the way through. So I'll support this motion, and I look forward to seeing more of our SEPTA policies in, coming through some of our ordinances and stuff like that. So thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Owen, Councilmember Boyette.
So I just wanted to share a similar thought. I likewise will support this, and I think it's fine to forego the issue on the fencing. The developer's right to say the solution, and I think I said this earlier, the solution for the trail along the Byerly Drain likely quite different than what's going on in the middle of the community. The only thing I want to note is that the developer's response to that issue seems to indicate a lack of understanding of what SEPTED is and could be. It doesn't have to be a long corridor to be scary. You can have entrapment on very short corridors. So I would certainly hope that there will be a SEPTED presentation in our community, a training coming up in May, and I would hope that any developer who's working on a project now or in the future will consider joining it, so that we can do this as a community rather than sort of oppositionally. We should be looking at all of these community developments through a SEPTED prism. So I think it's good to move forward with this and focus on connectivity, and likewise, I look forward to seeing those amended subdivision regs.
Okay, Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Monica, I got the name right this time. So 3 years from now, Mr. Wild has one lot left or no lots left, and the city gets permission to build the bridge. So now he's going to have to come up with 50% of the money, but it doesn't, it says that though. That's what it says though.
It's not how it works. So as of right now, Mr. Wild, who is the applicant and who is on the hook for this preliminary plat, is the only person that's in the picture right now. So it is very common to see in conditions of approval that the developer will be required for something. So once there is nothing in this, the way that this is written, that would prevent final plat from being reached, which means he's going to have the ability to transfer lots. The way that the statutes talk about creating SIDs, you have to, there's a number of ways that you figure out what properties are contributing or benefiting from that improvement. And all of them get assessed the same way. So if the decision comes forward in 3 years that an encroachment can go and then a bridge can go across the Byerly Drain, and if Mr. Wild still only owns one lot, he's only going to be responsible for his percentage of that entire district that is paying for that SID. He's not going to be responsible for 50%. As of right now, as the whole, the way that we see it is that this development, the development at max, would be responsible for 50% of the whole SID of all the landowners in the SID that are being assessed. I would welcome, yeah, sure, I'd welcome your amendment.
Councilor Gulick.
I'll support the motion. I think to the issue of SEPTED and whatnot, I think this would, not going forward, better be a street than a pedestrian way. And I think that's the way that we actually already do have the regulations. We do have when we passed recode, basically that's the 800 feet per block face. And I prefer to see those as streets rather than as pedestrian ways for some of the reasons we're talking about here. Again, I think it's too late, obviously, to apply to that towards a connection between Trails West and Buffalo Crossing. And I think maybe for Buffalo Crossing West right now. But going forward, I would like to see those as streets rather than as pedestrian ways. That would be the default position. I can think of some cases where there is exceptions, where there's a park right adjacent and it makes sense to do a trail instead. But I think that's more the exception. But again, I appreciate the efforts staff has taken working with the developer to improve connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we proceed to a vote? Any further discussion? Okay, is the motion clear? The motion is for approval of item 1L, consistent with the staff recommendation, the existing documents with the exception of the staff recommendation that you see on the screen. If the motion is clear, why don't we go ahead and have a hand vote? We'll ask people in favor of the motion to raise their hand, and then people opposed. So if in favor, please raise your hand. Voting in favor. Council members Shaw, Gulick, Neese, Owen, Joy, Cherokee, Tidswell, Purrington, and Rupsis. If voting in opposition, raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members or Boyette and Cole. Motion passes. And I think that concludes item 1L. I think it's really close. Our next item up, and we'll have to make a decision here, council, is the first reading on zone change. My inclination is to break, come back, it's 7:23, come back at 7:30, rather than getting into what's going to be probably at least a half-hour discussion on the zone change here. I'm assuming staff is not telling us that we can plow through item number 2 in 10 or 15 minutes, are you? Or are you?
No.
Under 2 hours?
Yeah.
It's an existing use, I think it's simple.
It's all up to you.
Well, I don't want to get into something that can't be resolved very quickly. So what's your estimate of time? Because we'll just take a break and come back at 7:30. Okay, we'll take a break, come back at 7:30.
I'm not going to support that.
Okay. As soon as we get a clerk, we will read item number 2.
Denise isn't there.
There's no one to read it.
You can actually read it into the record later if you want.
Sure.
Chris, we have nothing.
We have no, yeah, okay, but Nicole is there, so we're good.
Sorry. It's all right. Trying to sneak through.
So Denise, if you would read item number 2.
Yes, Mayor. Public hearing and first reading ordinance for zone change 1018, generally located at 2110, 2116, and 2130 Bench Boulevard. Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 criteria.
Thank you very much. It looks like our zoning coordinator, Nicole Cromwell, is our presenter tonight. Is that your right title?
I am. I'm the zoning coordinator, and I'm standing in for Karen Justin this evening. I hope this is on. Does this sound like it's on?
Not really.
Okay, now it's on.
That's better.
This is a zone change for property that has frontage on Bench Boulevard at 2110, 2116, and 2130. It's currently zoned mixed residential 1 and X1. And the proposal is to move the zoning boundary to increase the area of the lot that is zoned heavy commercial for Old Hickory Shed and reduce the area that is zoned NX1. This is the subject property here. Under our previous zoning code and map, these properties were zoned highway commercial, the entire property. And so use by Old Hickory Shed, if under the old zoning code, would have allowed them to use the entire property both for residential uses and for commercial uses. But when we updated the map and we determined the proper zoning for properties, we decided that because our CX zoning doesn't allow residential uses, that we didn't want to create a non-conforming use where there wasn't one now. So we placed mixed residential 1 zoning on the frontage, on the portion of the property that faces Bench Boulevard where the residential uses are. Old Hickory Shed is to the west, and they have frontage on Main Street. The proposal is to reduce that NX1 to just areas around those existing homes on Bench Boulevard and expand the CX to allow Old Hickory Shed to, 1, use a part of the property that they have been using in the past before we updated the map for stock and storage of completed sheds and materials for their business. Here's the subject property. This is an aerial photo, I believe from this is a county map. So this is a 2021 aerial photo. It shows, perhaps if I can hit the right button. This is Old Hickory Shed, their main buildings. It doesn't show you all the way to Main Street, but they have an access on Main Street. And then this was their storage and laydown yard for materials and sheds that were in some way prepared, half prepared, ready to deliver. So a typical manufacturing laydown yard, which is an allowed use in the CX and was an allowed use in the highway commercial. This is posting of the property from the Bench Boulevard side of their property. So you can see there's a residence here, there's another residence here, and we'll go through the photos. And then a third residence looking south and west across the property from Bench Boulevard, and looking south directly down Bench Boulevard. Bench Boulevard is a principal arterial street. It is a 3-lane section. It has a center turn lane and 1 lane for each direction. as well as the shoulder area. I think typically those are used by bicyclists, but they're not marked for that. This is another property that's on the north parcel, set back from Bench Boulevard. So there are homes on this side of the property. And then looking north along Bench Boulevard, and then across Bench Boulevard, there is, we'll go back to the zoning map soon, but show you that is N2 neighborhood across Bench Boulevard. So as you can see, the access from Bench Boulevard kind of winds its way between these homes. And you can see some of those sheds are laid down on some of the property that is currently zoned NX1. But further in the distance, the zoning line goes from NX1 to CX. Here's the front of the property from Main Street. As you can see, there is a raised median here on Main Street. So the only way into this property is coming from the south, and the only way out of this property is to go to the north. If drivers want to head south from this location, they have to go up to further intersections north, Pemberton Lane, go to the east, head south on Bench Boulevard, etc. Somehow take a direction movement that gets them going back south on Main Street. There was a complaint that was made to code enforcement earlier this year in January that they were filling up the yards of these homes on Bench Boulevard with sheds. And under the old zoning, that would have been okay, although not okay, because we don't want residents' quality of life affected by, an intrusion of clearly a commercial use. But again, here is a wider view of the aerial of the property. So there is one access on Main Street. It's a right in, it's a right out. Here is the use of the property as of 2021. And you can see those homes that are designated on Bench Boulevard. So this is the photo from January of this year when the sheds were starting to take over the front yards of the residences on Bench. And that's when, the owners discovered that their zoning was different than it used to be, that they were not grandfathered, that they couldn't just move sheds all the way across the entire property, that they had to move those back, which they did promptly. They got them off of those parcels, away from Bench Boulevard and around those homes. And then they pursued this zone change so that they can have that area for their business, but also preserve those homes as is on Bench Boulevard. And as you can see, this access onto Bench Boulevard is used by the business as well as by the residences. Again, here's the subject property from Bench Boulevard. So the Zoning Commission is recommending approval of the zone change based on the findings that are in your staff report. It is predictable and reasonable city taxes and assessments, and it provides the expansion, or at least the current area where this business uses the east part of their property to lay down sheds and materials. And it will help retain and support that existing business at that location. We believe, based on the way most of the area between Bench and Main Street is zoned, that these uses can be compatible. There is a proposed, it's adjacent to corridor mixed use 1 to the north. That was a recent zone change for the former veterinary clinic, for the new dog daycare that went in there. And there are also heavy commercial uses to the west. So it encourages that appropriate commercial use to stay onto Main Street, and allows those existing residential uses to stay conforming. Here are the 10 review criteria as stated in our code. The findings are in your report. And I think I want to go back to the zoning map. Karen has skills I don't have with PowerPoint. She has all these nice transitions. So the CMU 1 is that zoning to the north there. So the NX 1 will have kind of this zigzag pattern to it. And the approximate depth from bench is about 175 feet on the south. It's a little wider in the middle, and then 108 feet on the north. We'll have a meets and bounds description in the ordinance, so we know exactly how to measure that, how it gets mapped. They're not moving the property boundary. They don't have to for a zone change, but they have to describe it well enough so that we can map it and enforce that. One of the issues that came up at the zoning commission was whether or not they would be required to provide now an appropriate screening or buffering, landscape buffer between those residences and this new zoning boundary. And until they do an improvement to that commercial part of the property, there's no trigger mechanism in our code to require them to put in that screening or buffering. So for example, if the property is valued at $1 million and they put in $100,000 or more investment, build a new building, pave the yard, or put in some other improvements in the existing buildings that equals $100,000 or more of the existing building value, then they would have to make those proportionate improvements to the property. And our first goal in that is to provide appropriate buffering to adjacent residential uses and to provide appropriate street frontage landscaping. So as properties get improved, we require proportionate compliance with those standards. So that's when that gets triggered. The other issue that came up was the use of Bench Boulevard and that driveway that crosses through the residential area from the commercial area. That is an existing approach. There's no limitations that the state or city put on use of that approach. It's all on private property, and Bench Boulevard is a principal arterial, and it's built to an arterial street standard, so it can have truck traffic on it. So there's no limitation that the city can place on the use of that. Typically, when we have a site improvement that is significant, city engineering will say, well, if you intend to continue to use this driveway that connects Main Street to Bench Boulevard, we're going to require you to improve that with pavement and drainage, so that it doesn't drag gravel out onto our street. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Questions, council? Councilor Owen, Councilor Purington?
I just have a couple of kind of rapid fire questions. The property from Bench to Main is all one owner, right? So those three residences are owned by the same people who own the subject property?
Right, they rent those out.
Right, okay. Why Why does a change in zone not trigger essentially a change of use like we have in building codes? Why would this zone change not trigger a landscaping requirement? It was residential, it's now commercial. Why doesn't that trigger?
Because we didn't put that in our zoning.
Okay. There's no policy reason behind it. It was just an oversight?
No, it's because we wanted to allow people to continue without having to fix every nonconformity all at once. So there's a lot of different nonconformities. So there's site development standards, there's setback standards or building height or even use nonconformities. So we wanted to focus on getting sites up to standards, and how we do that is through the building permit application.
And then just to be clear, the issue that triggered the building code, or the, code enforcement complaint, it isn't really addressed by this, right? I mean, in no circumstance would this zone change allow them to put sheds in the front yard facing bench,
No.
right? They will go behind the property.
Right, they would go
Coincidental.
on the properly zoned property.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Pearson?
And I'm kind of going along the same vein that Jennifer's going on. So why NX1? Why is that zoned NX1? Because there are 3 single-family homes on there, even though they're rentals?
I don't have the details of what the residences are. They might have multiple units in them.
Oh.
But also, when we were choosing zones and on putting those on the map, we considered what street frontage, what type of street frontage were they on? And the Billings Heights neighborhood plan said, we want mixed uses and higher density between Bench and Main. So that's
Okay.
why the NX1 is there.
Okay. So just one other question. When you're talking about that, to me, it looks like a gravel road through the property. So you're saying that the city might require a paved road through that property if it brings out gravel onto the city street. Did I hear you say that?
During a building permit review that they submit, to improve a building on the property, on the commercial side, and engineering looks at the whole site, so they look for substandard sidewalks. Does the drainage need to be improved? Is there an access that's unpaved that should be paved at this point? And that's when that would get triggered. But it wouldn't be a road. It would still be a driveway, just an access.
And the owners know that?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Renese?
Thank you, Mayor. Just following up on that. So until that time, that'll continue to be a gravel road, continue to bring gravel out onto Bench and cause more damage to Bench. Is there any way we can prevent that?
Well, if it's particularly egregious, we do have stormwater prevention guidelines. I don't know if Debbie's still here.
Okay, but there is
Nope, she's not
ways
still
that
here.
it gets.
There is a mechanism.
Okay.
They receive a complaint, there's a lot of gravel on the road here all the time, or a lot of mud, and it's clogging the drains. So they go out and they do an investigation. At that point, they could just say, it's time to improve this driveway.
Okay, so, Mayor, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
So this property is all owned by one owner, including the 2 properties at Main Street. So they own everything. They're splitting their property, not so much along borderline. So it's still going to be one property, but with kind of like a mini PUD or PMD or whatever we call it.
Right.
Yeah. And so when you say trigger, you use $100,000 for $1 million. Are you saying that's 10%? I mean, is there any trigger? Is it any permit they pull triggers it for site review?
It triggers it for us looking at how much is that value increasing
Okay.
in this building.
So in case they get hail damage, they got to replace the roofs on the homes, that's going to trigger site review so that now they have to put some buffering along, is that?
It may.
Okay.
It
That's-
depends on how much value that is compared to the existing building value.
Right, so if they got 3 roofs, they're putting in, that's 30, say 10,000 a piece, or 30, 20,000 a piece, whatever, say 60,000, then they're going to have to put also in addition another 60,000 in site improvements if it's buffering, fencing, whatever.
I don't know if it would be 60,000. It would depend on that total value of those buildings. So if the total value of those buildings, as determined by Department of Revenue, we use their numbers,
Okay.
is $600,000 altogether, and it's a $60,000 roofing project. That's 10%. That is the minimum trigger for us to look at site improvements. We don't make them do 100% when they're doing a 10% investment.
Okay.
We look at them doing 10% of the deficit.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess our question is, I mean, I don't like to see more CX moving closer into Bench Boulevard, but I like the idea there's at least NX there, but I also like to see transitions between residential and heavy commercial. Would a CMU still allow them, some other commercial, still allow them to do what they're doing? And why not?
No, really, the CX is the zone district where that use is intended to go. And there is a lot of CX on Main Street, particularly north of Wicks Lane, on both sides of the street, because we have a lot of these contractor yards and kind of small builders.
Yes, it is on Main Street, but this is going to be on Bench Boulevard because they're continuing to use the road. So you're going to get a lot of more heavy truck traffic and maybe large trucks hauling sheds out of there onto Bench Boulevard.
They do already.
Yeah.
They have from the
Right.
beginning. So.
And so that's what I'm asking. So there is a CMU type of and some other type of zoning. What prevents it from using something similar to what's just north of it?
Well, they could have gone all the way to Bench Boulevard with the CX, but that would have put those residential uses would become non-conforming to the property. And I don't think they wanted to be in that position. And generally, we don't encourage people to create nonconformities with their zone changes. It's just not good planning. So a CMU1 zoning for just the frontage of Bench, where it's now NX1, would also make.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the CX. So a CMU1 in the back half of the property. What use is it preventing, is CMU1 or CMU2 preventing?
It's the use as a storage yard.
Storage yards and not allowed in CMU1 or 2?
The CMU1 is fairly restrictive on those types of uses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we have to go to a public hearing, any other questions for Nicole? Okay, thank you, Nicole. This is a public hearing on item number 2, zone change 1018. If you'd like to comment, please come forward. Just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sean Thorson. I'm with IMEG. We are the agent of the owner of the properties. Originally, we held a neighborhood meeting for this, and originally the owner did want to take CX all the way to Bench Boulevard. We held the neighborhood meeting, and the big comment was they wanted a buffer to not have the commercial go to Bench Boulevard. The other one was, as Nicole pointed out, the traffic coming out. Went back to the owner, brought these issues to him, and this compromise was to scoot the commercial back and leave the NX1 buffer there. The reason for the jog here is the residential houses there. We used the NX1 setbacks that are in the zoning regulations, and then added a little buffer on top of that to place that boundary for the CX boundary to the west of those properties. Earlier question of both properties, the owner is actually in which one is this? Oops. The owner is actually in a contract to purchase this property right here, and currently owns this one up here. So they are in the process of getting that. That's why they were going through the zone change on both of them. We actually had to get permission from the landowner of the south to go through this. And I'm here, I can answer any other questions that you guys may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Tidswell.
Did you say there'd be a screen between the NX1 and the CX? There will be some sort of a screen there? Fence, screen?
Currently, there would not be until that trigger happened, that what Nicole was talking about, when there was an improvement to the property, then the city would then enforce that landscaping buffer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Don't see any, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on item number 2? Please come forward.
Mayor and council, my name's Dale Smith. I live at 2145 Bench Boulevard. And as been stated, they have put their sheds almost on the sidewalk. Granted, they did move them back, but they are encroaching back up. So if they're not going to follow the rules that they have now, are they going to follow them down the road? Also, if you go by the CX zoning for heavy commercial, it states that the district intended this to locate along corridors where proximity to residential and walkable mixed-use development is limited. We have a junior high and a grade school, probably 2 blocks from this, that the children walk down these sidewalks to and from school. And since I live across the street, I've seen semis come out of there. The gravel and stuff's on the road, but the driveway itself was designed for a house, not for a semi-truck. My personal feeling is they've been breaking the rule for ever since they bought it. Even if you change it, what's going to stop them from breaking the rules then? That's it. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Smith? Don't see any. So I guess not. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item number 2? Please come forward if you do. Don't see any, so no one is online, so we'll close the public hearing on item number 2. Back to council. Council, do we have motions for the discussion for staff or motions or questions? Councilmember Purington?
Just one more question to Nicole, and I think that was a good point as far as the school foot traffic with heavier trucks and that safe routes to school that we keep working on. How would that work? I guess that's my question to you, is how would heavy traffic deal with that on Bench? Because if it's 2 blocks away?
I mean, I'm not sure what the status is of Bench Boulevard as a safe route to school, but I imagine that it has sidewalks on both sides, that it is walkable. But there are probably other safe routes to school on arterial streets that have
Heavy traffic.
different types of traffic that can impact that walkability. I have not had a specific complaint about that come through or across my desk, so.
Thank you. And I think just addressing Mr. Smith is that whenever there are property issues, code enforcement is not what we call proactive. If there are issues, then those need to be reported to the city, and the city will take care of those. And I
Right.
think they're pretty active now, so if there's issues, then that's the direction that they need.
Yeah, you have 7 or 8 officers now, so don't be shy.
Okay, Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve first reading ordinance for zone change 1018 and adopt the findings of the 10 criteria as recommended by the Zoning Commission.
The motion, is there a second? Councilmember Boyette. Discussion on the motion. The motion is for approval consistent with staff recommendation, zoning recommendation. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I suspect this is probably going to pass, but this type of zoning, where it's just chopped up like this, 50 years from now, when a council is going to be sitting here looking at some request for, they're going to what did that council do, having this chopped up like this? I think when, I really strongly believe we need to have better transitional type of zoning from CX into NX or in property. And so I am concerned that our regs now don't allow buffering when we're changing it like this. maybe that's one area we could look at changing to where if we are going to have zone changes where it goes to commercial next to residential, maybe that zone change would trigger some type of buffering or landscaping requirements to be put in. I think would be appropriate if we're going to be moving from residential to a heavy commercial like this. So I really don't want to support this, but I'm sure it's going to pass, I suspect.
Thank you. Further comments on the motion? Councilmember Tracey, Councilmember Rupsis.
Nicole, can you show us on one of these maps where the driveway is that's coming out? Do you know?
Oh, I think maybe. It's not in there, but it's kind of midway. If I wanted to say, it kind of swoops. It comes through the
You can see it
middle.
on the next slide. Right there. Go,
Go back to this one?
yeah.
Okay, so between the two buildings from Main Street, comes in here, and then it kind of goes to the south and comes out here.
Okay, so
kind
that
of
is
right across.
currently,
It doesn't match with the alley, it kind of is right in the middle, but towards the south.
right, but that is currently owned by the shed company.
Yes.
That lot right there is currently
Yes.
owned by the shed company. So if they wanted to put a driveway there, they have every right to put a driveway there?
It existed.
Yeah. I mean, it
When
exists, yeah.
Bench Boulevard was rebuilt and everybody had to decide where their drive approach was gonna go, this drive approach went where that existing gravel driveway came out onto Bench.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Rupsis.
I just wanted to agree with Councilmember Neese. I don't like this kind of gaming, it almost feels like. I think there's nothing to stop the business from knocking these houses down or turning them into commercial offices and then extending CX all the way. My only saving grace, and why I'll probably end up supporting this, is everything north of here and west of Bench is all CX and CMU1. So it is consistent with the area. East of Bench, of course, we've got all the residential neighborhoods, but they're all existing there and existing somewhat peacefully with the CX zones to the west of Bench. So I think in this particular case, it's consistent with the neighborhood, and I'll support it. But it does worry me about this kind of gaming that we've got. We've seen a number of these cases lately that concerns me. Thanks.
Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I really enjoy our discussion. I don't think cities develop all at once, and they don't develop it with a grand scheme in mind. There was a county island in Ward 3 that was brought into the city, and it had a very industrial use. And someone called me and said, I'm very concerned this zone change is coming, or actually annexation is coming up, and this property is going to come into the city, and I'm very concerned about that. And I said, actually, that's a good thing. So when we look at an area that has been in the county, developed in the county, stayed in the county until, in terms of the overall arc of our city, very, very recently, there are a lot of situations like this. There are still situations on the West End with a feedlot that is 2 blocks from a huge middle school. And the feedlot really does pull into the HVAC system, I can tell you from experience. We have these things, that's how cities develop. There isn't a way to go back and undo history and to make it all planned like it should be. We sort of learn to live with the warts. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion. Councilmember Printington?
Just a quick question, Nicole, on the slide that shows the different colors, and Mr. Thorson said that they were looking at purchasing, is that area, like right where it says 1.93, that strip, is that not owned by Old Hickory? I thought it was.
The Old Hickory is is this parcel
Oh.
right here, and then this piece right down here is under contract.
And so it would be part of the CX property?
Yes, and the property owner signed,
Oh, okay.
so they're part of the application. You can go back to the Randy Miller.
Okay. And so that's whenever some of that fencing or landscaping would come into play whenever they decide to build on that or to use that lot.
Right, or improve
Gotcha.
it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move to a vote, but Nicole, while you're there, can I just ask you a 30,000-foot question? Which really is not specific to this property, but we hear people from the Heights will often complain that they don't have access to a lot of commercial opportunities or places that you see on the West End. As many restaurants, as many kind of national retailers. We hear that not frequently, but not infrequently. But again, with your 30,000-foot pilot's hat, because you're flying up high level, aren't we likely to see a lot of pressure for Main Street to move east and west? Because basically, Main Street's landlocked. And we got one strip of development in the Heights, and it's either going to stop development, maybe just keep moving to the north toward the bypass. But it seems inevitable there's going to be a lot of pressure to move east and west. I just want to give you an opportunity, if we're already seeing that, if you see barriers to that, or yes, we should expect to see attempts to commercialize more going east and west from Bench. Or I'm sorry, east and west from Maine, which would impact Bench.
I don't get that impression. I mean, and we do have the neighborhood plan to follow to guide us when people are inquiring. It's like, I have this piece and it's on the west side of Lake Elmo, but it needs to be zoned this. We say, well, you can certainly consider that, but does it fit in with the neighborhood plan? Does it fit in with the adjacent properties? And a lot of times we can direct them back. I see that there is interest in those corridors between Bench and Maine and Lake Elmo and Maine in redevelopment. 30,000 foot level, there are challenges with doing that because you have a separate water district from the sewer district or sewer services that are provided. That Main Street is tightly controlled by the state of Montana and how you access there. So if you have an existing driver approach, you better hang on to it. Don't suggest moving it. Don't suggest, doing anything major with your drive approaches. But I'm starting to see, little redevelopment projects, little investment projects as they come along. But nothing,
Okay.
nothing major.
Okay, thank you. Just want to give you an opportunity to comment on that overview. Counselor, prepared to vote on item number 2? Okay, so the motion is for approval consistent with the staff recommendation. If in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition from council members Tidwell and anyone else? No. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Denise, would you read item number 3? And this will be a joint presentation on item 3A or 3A little I, the annexation, and 3A little 2, the zone change. So why don't, Denise, if you would read both 3A1 and 3A2.
Okay, this is regarding Michelati property, joint public hearing for annexation 2207 and zone change 1020. Resolution for annexation 2207, a parcel located south of Avenue D and east of Tiburon Lane. Staff recommends conditional approval. And first reading ordinance for zone change 1020, generally located south of Avenue D and east of Tiburon Lane. Zoning Commission recommends approval and adoption of the 10 criteria.
Thank you very much. So Monica, or I guess we'll start us off with a presentation, and council, just a reminder, we'll have a joint staff presentation on both these items. We'll then have a joint public hearing on the two items, but we'll need to have separate votes, separate out the annexation from the zone change. So Monica.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. I think everyone understands the interrelatedness between tonight's item. The mayor just gave a pretty good overview of just the joint hearing, but the separate actions. We will be covering the request for annexation, the conditions for the annexation, the zone change recommendation, and also the word boundary. I do not have a special presentation separate from this for the word boundary ordinance. This is for Ward 4, and just briefly, anytime property is annexed into the city, it must be matched with a ward. So for anyone wondering what specifically that is, that's all we'll discuss there. So moving forward, we'll focus on the request for annexation. This is the annexation exhibit that is a part of the resolution for annexation. The area highlighted in gray is the property. It's a 7-acre parcel that is adjacent to city limits on 3 sides, north, east, and west. It's 7 acres and it's presently zoned rural residential 3, which it cannot remain as it comes into the city. This is a photo of our limits of annexation map and highlights the property. You can't see the property, the parcel line too clearly right there, but it ends right there. It is within the red petition area. Here is an aerial of the property. How about I'll just keep going, how about that? I can't mess it up too bad, it's all labeled. Yes, okay, so as I stated, the subject property is zoned rural residential 3, a county zone that cannot be recognized by the city. To the north, we have NX1 mixed residential. To the east, we've got neighborhood mixed use as well as CMU 1. Public 2 to the south for the Memorial Park, and an established neighborhood N2 to the west. Many of you are familiar with this property. We've had a lot of activity in the vicinity lately. It has always been anticipated that this area would develop. More specifically, if we take a little bit bigger view, you can see where the developer is proposing 2 zones or the landowner is proposing 2 zones for this specific property. NX1 along the western boundary and NX3 along the east portion of the property. Back to the aerial of the subject property. I have some photos for you. This is the property looking south from Avenue D. This is looking west from Avenue D, looking east, and looking southeast. So I'll highlight the annexation policy criteria. We've shown that the property is located within the limits of annexation map. The city is able to adequately provide services, and that information has been provided in your staff report. Along with that comes our evaluation of public improvements. We have 2 standard conditions of approval that we select from based on what type of development is going to occur. On November the 14th, you will have an opportunity to review a subdivision plat for the parcel, and there will be an SIA for it. The SIA focuses on public improvements that the developer is required to do. So in this case, we would not have a development agreement, or as we now call them, annexation agreements. See how I caught myself on the fly there? Annexation agreement tonight. The condition specifically says that within 45 working days, there needs to be a preliminarily approved subdivision improvement agreement. So the November 14th date would get us there well within time. Additionally, we are requiring a standalone waiver because these are coming in with annexation. They're not subject to the 20-year limitation that waivers in subdivision are. So that's how, through this process, we're intending to address our public improvements. The proposed development of the site will be done in compliance with zoning and the site development regulations. there is no other option. If you're going to develop in the city, you must develop to our standards, or you must go through some other process to deviate from our standards. Additionally, residential densities planned for the development must have an average density of at least 4 to 7 dwelling units per acre. With the NX1 and NX3, there's absolutely no scenario where that average would not be achievable. And further, the proposed land use must conform to the goals of the adopted growth policy for the city of Billings. In particular, there is a lot of evaluation with the zone change application that highlights the aspects of strong neighborhood and home base. The zone change has different criteria. These are the 10 that are listed here, and there are findings included in your staff report. For zone change 1020, I'm just going, Nicole.
Okay.
If you want to. Yes, I like that. So it has been determined that it meets the growth policy in the West Billings neighborhood plan, that it is compatible with adjacent uses, and that both the NX1 and NX3 are compatible zones for the area. The developer is responsible financially for the improvements, site improvements and adjacent right-of-way improvements to accommodate our public infrastructure requirements. Like mentioned earlier, the subdivision for the property is pending. You'll have the opportunity to review that on November 14th. A traffic study is not something that is provided at the zone change level. It is actually specific to the actual development itself. And the city engineer and public works requires mitigation and management from the traffic that's created based on that traffic study. There's a recommendation tonight on these items. You'll need to hold a public hearing and take a comment on both the annexation and zone change. For acting on the annexation, we are recommending conditional approval, subject to 2 conditions, the standalone waiver and the subdivision improvement agreement within 45 working days. If you take action on this and fail to approve it, all the other items are no longer relevant. As far as the zone change is concerned, the zoning commission is recommending unanimously on a 4-0 vote the adoption of the findings and the 10 criteria and approval of the zone change. We are available for questions. Also, just want to let you know that the applicant's agent also intends to share information with you tonight.
Okay, questions for Monica before we ask for the applicant's agent?
Monica and Nicole.
And
I can't
Nicole.
steal all of her thunder.
Councilor Boyette.
Thank you. Recently, I've been driving around town and seeing how we're developing, and we're finding 2- and 3- and 4-story complexes bumped up right against a residential area. And in this case, you're going to have 2.5 stories right against the houses on Tiburon. Is that something that I was wondering if we thought about that when we were really doing the zoning, 2.5 years ago? Or did we think that we should maybe have a buffer between 2- and 3-story buildings and residential?
They're all residences. So there is no difference between people who will live in those 2- and 3-story places and the people who live in 1-story buildings. We change zones along rear property lines. In general, we try to do that. We don't like to change zonings across streets, so you have different housing choices or types that are not the same across the street, but they can be different across the rear property line. In the NX1, and I believe in the NX3, we increase the rear property setback for those structures when they are against an N district. So normally, a rear property setback in most of our N or NX zones is 5 feet minimum. So it's increased to 20 feet when it's adjacent on that rear property line with an N district. So you get additional 20-foot setback where you wouldn't have to do it normally. We also have different landscape buffers that are required between an N zone property, that's single family, and an NX zone property that's multifamily. So if you have an NX1 that's all single family, which you can do, it doesn't have to be multifamily, then the buffer adjusts based on the actual development that's proposed. So 2.5 stories or 27 feet in the NX1 zone district. So 27 feet, you could probably get a 2-story home in that, but not many. You would really have to have a very shallow roof pitch to get a full 2-story in an NX1 at 27 feet. So I don't believe the NX1 adjacent to the N2 here with all of those zoning requirements would be incompatible.
Okay. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Purington, and Gillick and Neese. Rupsis, I'm sorry, Councilmember Rupsis. I knew I had to get to you. I don't want to forget you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Nicole, I just actually want to follow up on that. So one of the concerns and the specific location that we're seeing a lot of concern about right now is at 3038 Central. And that's the new development. It was all zoned NX3 and it's right behind, I forget what the name of the subdivision there was.
Hunter's Ridge?
Yeah, the new Hunter's Ridge component. If you go back there and you look at, they now have 3 stories right, like you said, 20 feet off the property line behind the single-family homes. And then right behind that is the 4 stories. And it has created essentially just a wall, a 4-story wall behind these folks' homes. And I understand that concern. That is a big change for them, right? And so I think that was probably not intended. I think there was a condition, I think, that limited those structures right on the property boundary to 3 stories as opposed to 4, but then going right in, and if they can be 172 feet wide, it's just a large wall that they're staring at. And so I agree that we need to have a better boundary there, and the NX1 probably solves that in this case. Do you know what the width of that is? It seems like it might have to be at least 2 houses deep, maybe 150 feet at least. And is there a way that we can, as we do these annexations, essentially say, you know what, if we're going to do this, we want to encourage that density, and NX1 might be great, but we don't want 4-story buildings within, 20 feet of somebody's back property line. That's too severe of a change to put people through.
Well, we could look at the step backs that are required. That parcel that Hunter's Ridge is on used to be zoned RMF, which I believe the RMF had no height limit. So it was kind of an improvement to go to NX3, where we do have a story height limit. We don't have an absolute height limit. So we could look at that, is 20 feet enough, or should we go 30 feet or half, there's different ways of gauging that. Kind of the issue there is one of change, and it's not, just like a bunch of 2-story houses as opposed to a single-story house that's been there for a while. Kind of enjoyed that view that they've had. So it's dramatic, but we did make them comply with the code requirements. So as they're currently written, we couldn't make them do something more than what's required by the code.
Certainly, and I understand and appreciate that they have gone and ensured that they are complying with the new requirements. What I'm wondering about is in these kind of cases, and I think we've got a couple coming to us over the next couple months, where we're annexing in and also doing zoning at the same time, if during the annexation might be the appropriate time to say, you know what, within, I don't know, whatever the appropriate width of space is, whether it's 100, 150 feet, something like that, an existing property line that's already in the city or, is already developed, then we want to limit the height to 2 stories because that's consistent. And then we have, 4 stories beyond that or wherever they go. But just to make that a little less severe, would the annexation agreement be the right place to put that condition in place?
No. I think it would be more appropriate that you build that into your zoning. There is a section in the zoning code about zoning at time of annexation. So we are working on that particular part of the code as far as the substantive amendments to the zoning. For the opposite reason, because we were making people go through zone changes where it was obvious this is the zoning that it will be when it comes into the city. It's already developed. It's surrounded by the same zoning. It'll be that zoning. We don't need to make property owners go through a zone change. So we're working on that particular part of the zoning at annexation. We could probably look at proposing some other limitations or criteria or guidelines even within that section of the code. But typically, it's the property owner who proposes the zoning. And it's the zoning commission that reviews that and makes a recommendation based on the application for the zoning. We typically, and the city council generally does not move zoning boundaries at this point. It's just like, this is the zoning commission's recommendation. They find that this is appropriate. So we could look at doing additional setbacks for taller structures within the NX2 or NX3 zones. I think 27 feet is completely reasonable for NX1 as a maximum height. I don't think there's anything jarring about a 27-foot tall building, but we could look at that.
But just had another thought as well. I agree with Nicole's answer that it really makes sense for it to be in zoning and not an annexation agreement. And the reason being is that everybody's going to have an adjacent property. Sometimes they're developed, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they can be redeveloped. And so, if we were to make special stipulations in an annexation agreement that kind of one-offed height limitations or restrictions based on property that could redevelop, that's adjacent to it, maybe it's single story now, who knows, maybe it changes hands, whatever. But it's also very well a possibility that in an adjacent N2, that it's not just a single story building. It could be a 2-story building. It could be, something more. So I think if the concern is we want more transition, then that needs to be in the N2, in the NXs, in addressing a separation requirement, but not an annexation agreement requirement. Because we focus on
Okay.
public improvements.
We should move on. Councilor Rose, did you have any quick wrap up before we keep going?
If we get through the annexation process, we can't actually put that condition on the zoning tonight.
No, you
Right, so
cannot
that's what I'm trying to say, is this process to update the zoning setbacks is months out. How can we consider the residents in these interim applications that are coming through and provide some protection for them while we're working through those other things?
I think that that's a sentiment that we've heard loud and clear tonight, is there are ideas that the council has that are not codified yet. And so I think the reality of the situation is that landowners and developers are submitting applications to meet requirements based on the regulatory environment that exists at the time of application. It is a very hard moving target to make these exceptions in the interim. I mean, I think the best thing that we can do is work as quickly as we can to bring new amendments forward. But there is no annexation agreement associated with this action tonight. There's a subdivision improvement agreement. And again, those documents focus on public improvement. So I do not believe that there is an appropriate mechanism available to you to achieve what you want to do, because you would be parsing out allowances that are granted by the zone district. And the whole point of zoning is to say these things are allowable by right, and right now, the 20-foot separation is what's allowable to that property by right. in the zone.
Okay, we'll move on. Councilmember Purington, and then Gulick and Neese.
Okay, I won't really prolong what the comments were from Councilmember Repsis, but I think it kind of evolves in a lot of these different areas that we're annexing and zoning, is that sometimes whenever you buy next to vacant land and it's zoned in that, it's in a certain zone district, there will be change. And especially whenever you're abutted next to a major thoroughfare, whether it's the highway, major arterial, well, I guess all arterials are major. But anyway, but my question was, I don't remember, and I didn't drive by this one, is there not a ditch on the east side of Tiburon where the fencing is? Isn't there kind of a ditch there? So there isn't, I can't see it on a map, on a Google map. So what I'm saying is that, you know,
There may
even
be a
with,
drainage.
Yeah.
From, because a lot of this area was and is farm field.
Yeah.
And so those drains for the irrigation may exist here. But as far as I know, you can walk across that from the end of Avenue D onto this field.
okay,
So
I just
that may
remember
be
looking at it
included
before.
in some of the subdivision materials, but I don't think so. It's not a named drain,
Okay.
in other words.
Well, I would just remember seeing it in the other subdivision went through. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Gulick and then Neese.
I realized I had a comment rather than a question, so I won't dig it now.
Okay,
I'll wait till
Councilmember
later.
Gulick. Or I'm sorry, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Councilmember Rupsis for bringing that up, because I wholly agree that I think we need to look at these annexations and the adjacent properties to make sure we're not impacting them negatively down the road. But I want to ask Gina a question, because I thought that during annexation, we can condition the property coming in for annexation. We can place any condition we want upon annexation, including what Councilmember Rupsis said. Is that correct?
Yes, you can enter into an annexation agreement and place conditions on that. You just can't condition zone changes.
Right, okay, thank you. And
Can't condition zone changes.
Mayor, if you don't mind.
Councilmember Neese.
I'd like to call attention to Chris on this map. Because you're right, Monica, we did talk about this, and I argued exactly what Tom is arguing about, making these N3 changes, because they were actually changing to N2 at the north of that property of the NX3, and then they changed it to, I think, public along the very north of Colton there. And then it's NX1 all the way down from the top of Colton after the small public, down all the way down to Avenue D, I think it is there. And so this map is not correct. And so either that or the county map is wrong. But I pretty much remember us talking about this, and I actually probably voted against this change at the time.
Right. The applicant's map, which is what's on the screen, had the out-of-date zoning on it because the county waited a very long time to update the zoning for the Zimmerman Home Place subdivision after it was annexed and approved by the council.
Can we pull up the correct map so the council members actually can see what the map is? Because I think, Tom, your point about this annex is greater than what you think. What the map is showing is going to be a much larger section of annexed property all along the border there, which we've already approved. It's already been approved right in the back, on the back line of all those. And so we're looking at approving more Annex 1 there along that section. And I think what you're going to find is, you're right, we're going to have very large buildings built in the backyards of all these homes along here.
So 27 feet is the maximum height in NX1. 34 feet is the maximum height in N3.
Okay.
N2 is a 27-foot height limit as
27
well.
foot.
So
So NX1 is, how many stories is that? Just 2 stories?
2.5,
2.5 stories.
right, if you can make it work. I'm not sure you could do
And
27.
in NX1, is it how many units per building?
You could have 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Up to 4 units per building at 27 feet. Okay.
Okay, then, Counselor, we're ready to go to public hearing on these 2 items. We'll come back for more from council in a minute, but this is your opportunity. If you've come to comment on either item 3AI, the annexation of this property, or 3A little 2, which is the zoning, this is your opportunity. Oh, I apologize. Yeah, I promised an opportunity for our, the agent of the developer. So, Salverson, all yours.
My name is John Halverson. Mr. Mayor, members of council, good evening. My name is John Halverson. I'm a planner at Sanderson Stewart. Good to be here in person tonight. We're going to talk about this zone change. So this is a presentation that I gave at our neighborhood meeting. I'm going to abbreviate it by about an order of 5 here for you guys tonight. So, you know, because we've got this new code, we are out in the community, Sanderson Stewart and our client, you know, basically explaining why this new code promotes a mixture of residential uses and how it does that while maintaining quality in all those uses. So I'm just going to go really quickly. He's not here tonight. This is our site that we've talked about. There it is. So as you can see in that adjacent N2, we've got 2 stories of height there. And then in the NX2, it's 2.5. So a very gradual stepping up of height there. And as Wyeth mentioned, I think it's the foot measurement there is 27 feet. And that NX1 buffer is a full third of the site. It's about 200 feet deep. So it's a very generous buffer there. So then we go over kind of the past and zoning where we separated everything from everything. And then our growth policy, and then just idea that, you know, if we have all these single-use districts and the only way connecting through them is our arterials, if none of the streets interior to that connect, then we get these kind of outcomes. Places where we only live, places where we only work, places where we only shop, public facilities that can only be driven to, and great distances between destinations that make it difficult and unsafe to walk. And, you know, people talk about Grand Avenue and, you know, having that connectivity in D is essential there. So going back to this here, you know, this neighborhood, you can see this kind of like rainbow of uses here. Our uses are consistent with our all the uses around it, I would say. The NX1 is directly compatible, and the NX3 already exists in some amount. And what this kind of zoning allows for, this mixture of zoning, this level of connectivity, what it allows for is housing choice, transportation choice, neighborhood retail, right? We've got a residential density that can support neighborhood retail, and a lower tax burden because we don't have to build out huge arterials. Then we distribute these packets of the zoning, and we go through with the 5 homeowners who did come to our meeting. We go through, you know, because I get it. You know, in the past, the zoning made it so that multifamily sometimes could be a bad neighbor and could present you with a big blank wall on the street or something like that. But we go through how the code now makes all residential types, addresses those transitions between zones to make them compatible. And then we go through some of the look and feel of what is allowed in this NX1 zone. You know, everything from this 1 unit per structure up to the duplexes, through to, you know, 4plexes and townhomes, which would be allowed in that NX1 buffer. And then we go into the NX2, NX3 and walk through some of the things that regulate form there. And then this is the look and feel. Again, this is not necessarily exactly what we're going to get, but these are buildings that would be allowed in the NX3 zone. And then we play this game where it's, you know, recode on your side. How does recode prevent bad density? And, you know, no one, I would say, this development comes up quite a bit when we're working on these multifamily projects. And we say that, you know, how does, based on, you know, kind of the reading that we've done in the neighborhood meeting, how do we know that the recode prevents this kind of thing? Well, 1, the garages have to be on the back. You're not going to get a line of garages like this anymore. And two, that we're required to do a full, a local street section. So this kind of negative outcome that people kind of think about when, they don't have anything. When we're looking at just colors on a map, it's easy for imaginations to run wild. And so we want to show that these are the kind of things that are not possible under the new code. And then this is just one of the slides that we show, but we do, is it multifamily? And have our participants guess, is it multifamily or is it single family? And in this instance, this is multifamily. And these are units, the Mueller units down in Austin, Texas, where you can see that they, do I have a pointer here? Oh, so you can see that these larger ones here, these are sixplexes. From the street, it looks like a large single-family residence, but it is in fact, that gentle density. This would be allowed, this would be like an NX2 kind of building here, but you can see how it transitions across the alley with these single-family homes here, and it is really a compatible, gentle density, gentle transitions, where the things that are being regulated are the things that make these buildings good neighbors. And so then we go back and say, this kind of zoning, to me, when I look at this as a planner, this has all the makings of a vital neighborhood center where you could have a cafe in that NMU, and where community and value can start to agglomerate around this kind of residential density. So that's the really fast version of that presentation. I'm speaking really fast, so I apologize for that.
Good job. No, we appreciate that. Moved right through. Yeah, we appreciate that. Are there any questions for John before we go to public hearing?
Our client would like to speak.
Okay,
briefly.
thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Mayor and Council, Brad Brown with Stewart Land Company, and I'm the developer doing this project. And I want to say we're excited to be part of your community. It's kind of, I didn't know Billings very well till I started working here, 6-8 months ago, and I've been very impressed. And it's very impressive to see how seriously you take all these issues. But Stewart Land Company, we like to pride ourselves or try to align ourselves with the goals of the community rather than, decide what we want and try and force that in. And we really did come with the staff and, took the recommendations. And to your point, we recognized that was going to be an issue, that buffer zone, and we tried to design it as such and took that into consideration. So we are hopeful and we're confident that this will be a good, a deliberately planned good community for the city. And, as they've explained it to us and as we've read the goals for the city, we feel like it really lines up. And, we're excited to do it and think it's going to be a great project. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any for me.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Brown? Don't see any, so thank you. Okay, then we'll continue public hearing, or continue on with public hearing, or open the public hearing, I guess. If there is anybody who would like to come forward, please do so. On item number 3, this is both the annexation 3AI and the proposed zoning 3A little I. Is there any public comment on item 3A, little I or double little I? Any public comment before I close the public hearing? Sure.
Hello, Mayor and council members. My name is Louis Schoenberger, and I live at 1724 Norwood Lane. I'd like to go and state that I'm opposed to the zoning change, as I understand it, for this particular property. Looking at the zoning and the way it was originally proposed, it was going to be individual houses that were supposed to be developed there, and that would have been consistent, I believe, with the character of the community that I live in. I'm basically a block off of where they're going to be developing this. And to see large multifamily facilities going in, I believe they're not superstructures, but they're still quite large. We're looking at having, instead of hundreds of individuals living in this area, there will be, as I understand it, over 1,000 individuals living in this area. So it's going to be a higher population density and a higher demand on our community. So again, I am opposed to the change in the zoning as it's proposed.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item number 3? No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public hearing and proceed on. Councilmember Purington?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve first reading ordinance for zone change 1020 and adopt the findings of the 10 criteria as recommended by the zoning commission.
The annexation first.
Oh, this is, I'm on the wrong page. Sorry, guys.
Thank you. Yes, annexation.
We'll go back to that one then. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to conditionally approve annexation 22-07 as recommended by staff.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Tidswell. Discussion. This is again just on the annexation. Is there discussion, Councilmember Purposes?
Thank you, John, for that discussion, and I appreciate the insight that that Annex 1 zone will be 200 feet wide. I think that's a good precedent for separation of Annex 3 to the end zones, and I'll look forward to seeing that as kind of a standard going forward. I do agree that the Annex 1 right up next to the end zones is a fair transition. And I appreciate that thought that you put into that. So thank you for that. And again, I'll be looking for 200 feet. It's the standard that John set tonight, and anything coming forward for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I think the point about housing choices is really important. When we went through and looked at our zoning and made changes to our zoning, housing choices were something that I know was a value that we wanted to move forward with, the committees move forward with, and the council approved that. Even though I completely understand people who want a single home dwelling on a yard with a grass around it, as we found out this spring, and as we found out previous summers, there's a lot of intensity of use of resources to that type of housing choice. It should be a housing choice, but there are lots of people out there who want other housing choices. And so I appreciate that bringing forward that principle and something that we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Treaky?
I just want to jump on the notion of housing choices for a second. Right now, a lot of people don't have housing choices because we're not building enough houses. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing the market shift towards more and more density. And we're going to continue to see that. I certainly understand the reluctance to see huge changes from one neighborhood to another. But at the same time, given the way that we are doing development, there's really, we're just going to continue to see more and more of these dense housing properties that are out there. And in my mind, given the fact that a lot of people can't afford a basic entry-level rental right now in Billings, more density, I think, is a good thing.
Thank you. Any further comment on the motion? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. Before we do, I'll just echo Councilmember Purington's comment that, and Councilmember Treaky, because of the demand that we have for housing, people need to be warned that if they are near a vacant property, that they can't make any assumptions unless they go buy it or buy a covenant on it. They really can make no assumptions in this current market. They should expect, in all likelihood, some moved if it's large enough for a high density development. That way we can manage expectations. Just buyer be warned, I guess, if you're thinking about buying a place. Look for a very developed neighborhood if that's a problem for you. Okay, if we're ready, so the motion again is for approval, item 3A little I. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. That's only the annexation. So now 3A little 2, the zoning. Is there further discussion or a motion relating to 3A little or double or, you know what I mean? The two little things. Councilmember Tidswell.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve first reading ordinance for zone change 1020 and adopt the findings of the 10 criteria as recommended by the zoning commission.
You could read it faster than I can.
Yeah. Councilmember Parrington, you had the second? Okay. Okay, discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the zoning motion? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. If in favor of the motion for approval, item 3A, little 2, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes with Councilmember Neese voting in opposition. Okay, then that concludes item 3A. Now, item 3B is the boundary extension. Typically, we do not have a staff presentation on that. Is there anything about this that is different? No. So no staff presentation on item 3B, but we do have a public hearing. I assume there's no questions of staff before we go to a public hearing?
Does
Okay.
Denise need to read it?
Oh, thank you. Yes, Denise, would you read item 3B for the record?
Yes, public hearing and first reading ordinance expanding the boundaries of Ward 4 to include recently annexed property in annexation 2207, a parcel located south of Avenue D and east of Tiburon Lane. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, thank you. Again, no staff presentation. We'll move immediately to a public hearing. For anybody who's listening, this is the opportunity to comment on the extension of Ward 4. That's generally the northwest part of town. This property would become part of that upon annexation. Is there any public comment on item 3B, the ward boundary change? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on item 3B. Is there a motion? Councilmember Parrington.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to approve the first reading ordinance expanding the boundaries of Ward 4 as recommended by staff.
Second by Councilmember Tidswell. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion for approval 3B, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes item 3. We've already removed item 4. So that brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. So appreciate everybody's patience who may have been sitting here through the night to comment on something that was not on our agenda tonight. You're welcome to come forward. Just ask that you come and tell us your name, address, keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you would, address your comments to me, not to individual council members or to staff. We generally don't engage in dialogue in this time. This is an opportunity to listen to you, not to get into a discussion. But if you do have something that requires a specific response, we can get back to you by email outside the meeting. If we get in that dialogue, we have no way to really control the time and lots of other issues. So anyway, with that, please come forward.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you. Wesley Dunn, Dorothy Lane, thank you. So tonight, I want to talk about bullying. But first, I want to give credit where credit is due. Officers, Schaefer and Officer Hernandez, very good job. We had an incident this past weekend with another individual from the neighborhood running over my trailer, but they were very, very good and did their job thoroughly. So thank you for that. Another credit I want to give is my wife. She came up here last Monday and talked about herself a little bit, just to get to know y'all. I want to let y'all know that I'm the king of my castle. And that's my queen right there. And she will protect me in any way she possibly can. Vice versa. I'll do the same for her. So with her being here, it means a lot to me. And every one of y'all should see what she has, the devotion she has towards her king. Just take that in account with the falsely report that Chris and St. John gave y'all. So And so let's talk about bullying. First one that I want to comment on is Mr. Scott Emmerich. You are a bully and a liar. He wins the 2020 award for bullying. And let's see, where is he at? And his address is 1736 Colton Boulevard, Billings, Montana, 59102, if anybody's interested in that address. The second one, I don't have her address, but Miss Jennifer DeRay, she is she also wins the female award for 2020 of being the biggest bully in Billings. Let's see what the other ones are that I have. St. John, he's another one. I'm not going to give out his address tonight, but my wife's going to talk about an incident about bullying in this city, and I think it's a problem. It starts with our kids, starts with the parents. It starts with our officials, our city council. Where am I at? 12 seconds.
Okay.
Chris?
Are you done, Mr. Dunn?
Chris, you're a bully and a liar.
Hey, Mr. Dunn, remember,
Thank you.
address me. We're really not interested in your personal comments to other individuals,
Thank you, Mayor.
okay? Okay, next.
Amber Dunn, Dorothy Lane. Okay, so last year my daughter was verbally sexually assaulted by a boy on the bike path that we talked about earlier this year, on her way home from school. The school was notified and they handled the situation accordingly. I also went to speak to that child's mother to let her know what her son was doing to a young lady. That conversation went great. Everything was understood between her and I of what needed to be taken care of. Fast forward to this year, and now my daughter rides a school bus with this same child, who since the first day of school has thrown things at her like tampons out of wrappers, full water bottles, half full water bottles, and water, along with pencils to her face and my neighbor's children as well. I mentioned this to school transportation, whose cameras were not working on any of the dates given. They now tell me they have something in plan for that for next year. The parent was called at this time by transportation. Weeks went by. 3 weeks ago, this child was making fun of my child for needing surgery on an entire bus of high school students. He also told the whole bus that my child stank so bad that they covered this entire bus with cologne, so all these kids were coughing before they ever even got off the bus. This was the end of my rope as a parent. I went back to the child's house to let the mother know what was going on. No wonder this child's behavior is the same way that it is, because the mother starts to blame the victim, a child who sits in her bus and has things thrown at her. After she decided to say all these lies, I lost my cool and an argument started. My child burst through all of these other kids and adults, all of us were there, and decided to stand up for herself because she feels like on a school bus or at school, she is not able to do so because what college would let her in if she has something on her record? Plus, what repercussions would she be held accountable for in school? The point to this is our children should not be worried about retaliation from this school district or anyone if they stand up for themselves. Why are we teaching our children that they are not able to stand up for themselves against bullies or harassment on a daily basis? I tell you what we're teaching these children. We're teaching them not to stand up to people like our neighbors or for people in our city like we choose to do. It's not the right thing that we should be teaching these children, and they are our future. And if they don't think it's okay to stand up for themselves now, as a child, then how will they know as an adult that it's okay to stand up for themselves? 2 officers showed up. I'm kind of going to veer off of this for just a second. 2 officers showed up. One did a great job. The other said, press a restraining order on me. For what reason? I made no threats. I stood up for my child. We have a problem if we have judges that assign, really fast. If we assign restraining orders to parents that stand up for our children, That's a big problem that we have, and we're not teaching our children that it's okay to stand up for themselves, and I think that's a bigger problem. They're gonna grow up to be just like our neighbor. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, any further public comment? Looks like we might have a bunch. Go ahead and make a little line so we know who all is interested here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. We are all tennis members in this community, a part of the Billings Tennis Association that dates back to the 50s. Nonprofit here. We do various roles, I would say, within, but our organization.
Can you just give us your name and address so that
Thank
we
you.
can track you down if we need to?
Emma, I can give you a card too. Emma Larson.
Okay.
1010 North 32nd Street. Does anyone need a card? So the Billings Tennis Association, we are an organization that offers organized, affordable tennis to all ages, abilities, backgrounds within our community. I got to deliver that product this summer and teach at the courts, free tennis to adults. We put on free events throughout the year. And our goal is just to strive to grow the game, promote this lifetime sport of tennis, so we can all have a happier, healthier, as you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, healthier community that's physical, social, mental health benefits that our sport provides. So we are losing the Elks Tennis Center. It's transitioning, so that is our indoor tennis facility here in this cold tundra of the north. So we are strategizing and getting together with other parts of the community. We're going to you to see if there's land or any sort of redevelopment opportunities that we may be able to work together, partner together. Our community as a whole, our Billings Tennis community, we partner with parks, we partner with schools, we partner with community, I would say the Elks Tennis Center currently. So we're just looking to see where we can go for the future of our indoor tennis center. So, any other members want to add? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Kelly Seville. I'm a real estate broker here in Billings, been in business for 20 years, and started playing tennis about 10 years ago. Fell in love with the sport and became the vice president of the Billings Tennis Association. Just to kind of share with you my feelings about why this is important. It's not because we're a bunch of old ladies playing tennis. That's not really what it's about. What we offer is indoor tennis for the community, and that is our high schoolers come and practice. We've got classes for kids. We offer scholarships. We raise a ton of money. The BTA does a lot of community work, and we think it's really, really important that we get on board with tennis in Billings. And not just because we like to play tennis, but when I'm selling property and I have people moving to Billings, one of the things they ask me is, hey, I've got kids that play tennis, or I have, what types of things do you offer in the community? And I'm telling you, we are the largest city in Montana, and we are not going to have indoor tennis. This is a big, big deal. And I know this sounds really snotty, but we have a lot of people in our community that play tennis, that have kids that play tennis, that want their kids to play tennis. We have kids going to college that are playing tennis, and we are producing some amazing tennis players in Montana. And we need to be able to compete. And if we don't have somewhere for these kids to practice and play, we're not going to have tennis. It's going to go away. So I think it's really important that we get on board with this. I'm meeting with Big Sky EDA in about 3 weeks. We're going to hopefully put together a private public partnership, and we're working with some community leaders that maybe we can raise some money to do this. It's really a shame that we're losing the Elks Tennis Center. We were hoping that wouldn't happen, but it's a huge loss to Billings. And, I mean, I'll be honest with you. My husband and I both play tennis. We have a place in Texas. We'll be going to Texas in the winter. And a lot of my friends that play tennis are going to be leaving Billings in the winter to go play in other communities and to live in other communities. And that's unfortunate. And we're going to lose a lot of people. People won't want to come here because we don't have tennis. It's a big deal. Do you need my address?
Sure.
Okay. I live at 7 Ponderosa Lane in Boyd, Montana. I travel about 37 miles every day to play and work in Billings.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else there?
Hi, I'm Amber Sparks. I'm from 2528 Burlington. I have played tennis for 30 years. I've fulfilled just about every role. I'm the coach at West High for the boys. I have been the league coordinator. I'm on the Montana Tennis Association board. I captain teams. I play on teams. I work with kids individually. Tennis is my husband. My other husband is texting me to ask where I am right now, but tennis is my spouse. And the thing that we worry about is that Butte had an indoor tennis facility, and it was the center of Montana tennis when I was in high school. That went away, and now Butte has no tennis. They have 4 boys go out for their team, and you have to have 12 to field a full team. They have no indoor courts, so they have nowhere to play in the winter, so they just don't play, period. And I know that this seems like a very niche problem, which I fully agree that it is, but tennis produces some of the most accomplished individuals that come out of Billings. Mayor Cole's daughter was actually a participant in one of my tournaments. She won the tournament. She also won the sportsmanship award, nominated by other kids and parents. It's an important thing. And so a couple things that we're interested in and why we're bringing it to you is because in order to have an indoor tennis center, we need to have a place for that. We were hoping that maybe the city had some possible buildings. We're looking at, we want to have 6 indoor courts. We think that we could build programs for the community that would be supported by that. So we could have a possible wheelchair tennis program. We could partner with Special Olympics for programs. We are very interested in doing all these things. Very hard to do that if you only have a summer program in the parks. We would need a facility that would have approximately 46,000 square feet, approximately 1.06 acres, plus a quarter of an acre parking lot. So approximately 1.3 acres is something that we are looking for. We are hoping that the city might have an interest in looking for either land or a unused facility for us to develop, possibly both, either one, but those are the things that we are looking for out of you and interested in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other final comment there? No? Okay, it looks like we might have a few questions, Councilor Tricky.
How many courts are we losing from the Elks?
At the Elks, we currently have 4 courts. The development company that purchased them out of Utah is keeping 1 court.
Okay.
You can't run programs on 1 court.
Yeah. I strongly encourage you to write an email to all of us. So send it to council@billingsmt.gov, and that way, this information, gets to all of us.
That's great. Thank you so much.
I think that the community, statistically, the tennis industry would say that a community could support 1 court for 10,000 people. So right now, currently, we don't have enough space to include all ages, all backgrounds, all levels. So I think that's kind of our goal.
Okay, thank you. Our time for public comment on those is completed, but thank you very much. Much appreciated. And if anybody has looked at the West High Courts, you'll know that those were facilities formerly known as the West High Courts. Sorry, Mr. Dunn, your time is up, but.
I promise.
No, that's okay. We only give you one opportunity, not on each topic.
Good evening, Jacqueline Garcia, Dorothy Lane. Thank you, Jennifer Owens and Danny, for all of your help last week. I talked about the kids, and I've been doing some talking to other people and doing some research. I know that the talk about the big $98 million community area was last week, and I didn't get to come. $98 million. It's a lot of money, considering that we'd be in the negative every year. I did watch part of council online. My thought and proposal is smaller community areas like in the Heights, the West End, the South, where you have a community, we'll call it community center. Kids could come after school, do their homework. You could get businesses involved to donate, pool equipment, or Sean had an idea of getting donations of cars that need to be fixed up, and you teach kids how to fix up cars, and then you sell them for a profit, and then those kids go out knowing life skills. They know how to change a tire when on the side of the road. They know how to change their oil. A lot of kids don't know how to do that because we don't teach them those fundamentals anymore. I just think that smaller community-based centers would be more helpful. Some are for kids to go after school. That is safe. They'll stay out of trouble, less drug use, less activity. I know it's not gang, but gang-like activity. It'll just give them something to do. And I really think that we just need something for these kids. The Boys and Girls Club has 3 programs, but if you have a community center in the little location and you put money into it, I know it's an expense at first, but it could also generate money for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seathouse, did you say you'd like to donate a certain sportsplex to the tennis community? Is that why you're coming
I'm
forward?
going to include tennis now. Sean Seedhouse, 104 North Broadway. I'm not a political person by nature, and until I was asked to be part of the core planning committee for the new Southside Rec Center, I don't think I knew a single person in this room. Since then, I've gotten to know many of you, some of you as fellow participants in the recent chamber trip to Omaha, others through general dialogue in navigating what the new rec center could bring to our great city of Billings. This experience has broadened my understanding of our city process, and while our opinions may vary, I wholeheartedly respect every single person in this room for your commitment to making Billings better, and I wish the general public took a greater interest in what is accomplished within these walls. I would like to share my understanding of what Dustin Eaton clarified for you all in last week's planning session with regards to the difference in recommendations between the core and exec committee. A month or so back, I was surprised when I heard that the Exec Rec Center Planning Committee overrode the vote for the Core Planning Committee and reduced the design down to 1 sheet of ice while keeping the 50-meter pool. But I was optimistic when I heard that in that same meeting, the Exec Committee gave Sabura the okay to explore the purchase of the Billings Outlaws Sportsplex as a potential option for a second sheet at significant taxpayer savings compared to keeping it as part of the main rec center project. After reading the memo that was prepared by Wyeth Friday about why the city should no longer consider the Outlaws building, I can't help but think that that approval to explore it was from the very beginning maybe a way to avoid further pushback about change to the main plan designs. My main takeaway from that memo was a feeling from the city staff that the Sabura purchase recommendation was rushed. And if the council agrees with that, I believe it's a better option to continue to explore it rather than to take that option off the table. Lastly, as you consider these projects and who will run them, I want you to know that the Billings ice community is strong, and the hope for new ice in Billings has spurred excitement and a generational defining change within our ranks. We are currently working to redefine roles of our governing board, combining user groups, and exploring an overhaul of our current bylaws to accommodate the possibility of taking on management of multiple sheets of ice in this community. And Mayor Cole, last week you mentioned not really seeing significant representation of people within these groups at city council meetings. Well, if you give me a date, I will be more than happy to fill this room with passionate curling, figure skating, church youth group, hockey players, and parents. But I would suggest that you choose a day with a light agenda.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Kessler, I see you back there. I know you wanted to come forward.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Jerry Kessler. I live at 237 Avenue B here in Billings, which is about 3 houses down from Dallas Stadium, which is why I'm here again. I'm here about the noise controversy. This is an issue in the neighborhood that's been going on for 5 years. Initially, the noise that concerned us was coming from the games. I've lived at this residence for 43 years. For 37 of them, we coexisted with Dallas Stadium with no problem at all, no complaints at all. In fact, I was a teacher at senior high for 4 years, walked through there. 5 years ago, they implemented a new sound system. It's very good. It's very loud. It's so loud that I cannot get away from it. I can go to the darkest recesses in my basement, close all the windows and doors, and still hear it. At times, it actually rattles my windows. About 3 years ago, the city council, after repeated discussions, set up a noise committee. A number of people here were on it. I know the mayor was, Councilman Joy, Councilman Neese, maybe a few others. And I have to commend the city. They went above and beyond what I ever expected on the noise committee. They met, spent a lot of hours, spent a lot of money, hired an expert noise expert from noise person from Montana Tech in Butte, had numerous meetings, which I was there, they were there, the school district representatives were there, and they came up with what I thought was a solution, good and bad. One was going to be an MOU concerning the stadium noise. For whatever reason, that was never formulated, it's never written down. So that's still something that's out there. Since that time, the problem has escalated. It's escalated in the sense that the school district is basically ignoring the second provision of that committee, which says the PA system was not to be used during team practices. They just blatantly ignored that. They continue to hold team practices using the PA system at a very high volume to play music and to instigate what I believe is a substitution buzzer, which is a very high volume, irritating buzzer, horn, whatever you want to call it. It goes off during the practice from 2.5 to 3 hours every 4 minutes. It's paramount to have something from your front yard, front porch, honking their horn every 4 minutes for 3 hours, 5 days a week, or 4 days a week. They have games, the others. To complicate things, this summer they started football camps right after school. 3 camps for a week and a half period. Some of them had 3 sessions a day, 2 hours apiece, so you're looking at 6 hours, constant noise, plus the game. What I cannot understand is why the school district will not follow the city's recommendations after they put all that time and effort. They know it. I've talked to the athletic director. He's aware of it. He sent me an email saying he directly authorized the use of the PA system during practices, and it continues. He no longer answers my emails or my phone calls. I've been told to stay away from the stadium. I've tried to go over and talk to the coaches. I've been threatened. I've been verbally abused like I've never been abused. My reputation personally has been attacked. My professional reputation as a teacher at senior high has been attacked. I'm at a wit's end of what to do. My recommendation would be, maybe it's a lot to ask, but to reconvene the noise committee, to look at this some more. But beyond that, I really don't know what to do other than take maybe legal action or get the police involved, which is the last thing I want to do. But I'm here to suggest reconvening the noise committee and going from there.
Okay,
It's been a very frustrating experience, but I do commend the city. And they could have done more. They could not have done more.
Thank you, Mr. Kessler. And we did get an email from Chris end of the day saying you've renewed contact with School District 2. So hopefully we will reactivate that conversation.
Can I just comment on Mr. Kukowski? Well, I did contact him about the
Quickly.
music and the buzzer, and he apparently, I think, contacted school district, and they cut out the music. But that buzzer still goes off every 4 minutes for 3 hours every day.
Okay, great. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you, appreciate it.
that clarification. Presumably, we will have more on that. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? Do not see any, so close that. And any council initiatives? Councilmember Neese?
No, it's not an issue. I'm sorry. I just want to follow up with the comment about
Sure.
the noise ordinance. Chris, just to let you know, I mean, I was there during one of the games. I was over at the Billings Clinic parking lot and could hear the game from there.
That's a good system.
Yeah, I was over the Billings Clinic parking lot, could hear the game from over there. So it is very, very noisy, and I've had some other residents I've talked to over there. And so I know you're working on something now, but I think we need to get code enforcement at least to measure the noise, so we have some actual measurements of what noise level is being done at their border.
Very good. And for anybody who might be listening, my recollection of the ordinance or the plan for the MOU would not put restrictions during game time. And you might continue to hear that at Billings Clinic, but the neighbors thought that was unavoidable. They understood. They moved near a stadium, but it's the practice time and the more controllable situation. So, okay, we are adjourned then. Thank you, everybody.
Your room.